Chapter 2841. Mental Strength Training House, Haitian City, Upper Zone. A luxury hovercar slowly landed in front of the Upper Zone's entrance. A man and a woman then got out of the car, their appearance instantly attracting the hundreds of teenage boys and girls waiting by the entrance. This man and woman were none other than Xueqi and Muxin. However, all of the teenagers focused on Muxin, their eyes filled with surprise and confusion. Why is the Boulder Corporation's heir here at Haitian City's Upper Zone? Could she be transferring to our Upper Zone? That's impossible. I heard that Muxin broke through recently and acquired Grade 1 authority in Yuantian City's Upper Zone. Moreover, not only does she have the Boulder Corporation's full support, but the base layer supervisor is also quite supportive of her. At this rate, she might enter the middle layer of Yuantian City's Upper Zone. Why would she want to come to our Upper Zone? The teenage boys and girls began a heated discussion among themselves when they saw Muxin. They couldn't understand why a big shot like her would suddenly come to Haitian City's Upper Zone. Muxin, on the other hand, paid no attention to the teenagers discussing her. She behaved as if these people did not exist at all. Why are there so many people taking Haitian City's test? It's more than 10 times the number I saw at Yuantian City, Xueqi asked, astonished when he saw the crowd thronging the entrance. When he took the test to enter Yuantian City's Upper Zone, there had only been several dozen other people taking the test with him. Such a huge difference between upper zones was incredible. Haitian City's Upper Zone is more populous than Yuantian City's Upper Zone. It was also constructed a little earlier. Looking at the teenagers waiting by the entrance, Muxin shook her head and explained, however, these people aren't talents the Green God Company is nurturing internally. They were born inside Haitian City's Upper Zone. Also, this place is holding its annual evaluation, which is why so many people are here. The corporations behind these people will use the test results to determine their future successors and daily resource allocations. For these people, this period will most likely be the most competitive period of their lives. At this point, a hint of frustration darkened Muxin's eyes. It was precisely because of this competition that her relationship with Xueqi wasn't particularly good. Compared to life in the outside world, life in an upper zone was much harsher. I see. So that's why these children have such astonishing physical fitness, Xueqi commented. When he looked at the teenagers before him, he couldn't help sighing ruefully. He had to admit that the upper zone's children were indeed amazing. From what he could see, every one of these teenagers could easily beat up martial artists below the master standard. This wasn't a standard the youths born and living in the outside world could match. Having such amazing physical fitness at such a young age, these teenagers would become even more amazing once they entered God's domain. Let alone reaching Tier 4, they could very well reach Tier 5. At this moment, Xueqi finally understood why the various superpowers had so many Tier 4 and Tier 5 experts. He could produce many Tier 4 experts just from the group of youngsters in front of him. Let's hurry inside. Taking a look at the time, Muxin said, if we wait until the mental path activates, like last time, it'll be even more difficult to find that girl you mentioned. After all, we are residents of Yuantian City's Upper Zone, not of Haitian City's Upper Zone. Xueqi nodded in response and followed Muxin straight into Haitian City's Upper Zone. Although a person could freely visit all upper zones once they had a registered ID, the upper zones operated like independent organizations and competed with each other. In fact, some of the tasks the Green God Company assigned to the various upper zones were dependent on the performance of each upper zone. Hence, the residents of every upper zone were somewhat hostile toward the residents of other upper zones. Under normal circumstances, an upper zone's resident wouldn't visit another upper zone. After all, one mistake could easily result in a fight. Upon seeing Muxin and Xueqi walking straight into the upper zone, the teenagers standing by the entrance couldn't help envying them. This was because people older than 20 who could enter the upper zone directly had already obtained IDs in the upper zone. These people wouldn't have to struggle to enter the upper zone, unlike themselves. Who's that man? Why is a person like Muxin escorting him? He might be the son of some big shot living on the middle layer. Otherwise, why would someone of Muxin's standing guide him? Damn it! This is too enviable. If I were the son or nephew of a mental strength master, I wouldn't have to struggle here so desperately. I could even enter one of the middle layer's mansions for training. At this time, the teenagers waiting by the entrance couldn't help gazing at Xueqi with jealous eyes. As children of major corporations, they might be objects of envy for the people living in the outside world, but they were nothing in the upper zone. Only the big shots living in the upper zone's middle layer would garner respect from the upper zone's residents. After entering Haitian City's upper zone, Xueqi found that this place was indeed more populous than Yuantian City's upper zone. In fact, one could even consider it more prosperous. Not only were there high-rises all over the upper zone, but there was also something called the Mental Strength Training House here. Such a facility did not exist in Yuantian City's upper zone. The Mental Strength Training House wasn't particularly large. The entire building was only 2 stories tall, with the footprint of a basketball court. Yet, a crowd waited to enter this small building, including children of major corporations and the Green God Company's talents. There were even direct successors of major corporations standing in line. This was a sight that definitely couldn't be found in Yuantian City's upper zone. In fact, even Muxin felt an urge to enter the mental strength training house when she saw it. However, she could only let this urge fade away. This was because the notice outside the training house very clearly stated that only those with grade 2 authority or above in Haitian City's upper zone could use the training house. People of other upper zones would not be allowed entry at all. Aren't upper zones open to all residents with ID? Xueqi was confused when he saw the notice. Why is there such a rule in Haitian City's upper zone? Isn't this unfair to people of other upper zones? The upper zone placed extreme importance on mental strength. One could easily imagine how attractive a place capable of helping a person improve their mental strength would be for the residents of the various upper zones. There's no helping this. The Mental Strength Training House is a resource Haitian City's upper zone won after competing with the other upper zones. Hence, the Green God Company gave the residents of Haitian City's upper zone exclusive use of it. It is also why many more corporations are willing to invest in Haitian City compared to the other upper zones, Muxin said, shaking her head. A bitter smile appearing on her face, she added, if not for the Boulder Corporation having deep roots in Yuantian City, we would have most likely moved the focus of our development to Haitian City already. Muxin's words didn't particularly surprise Xueqi. Although he had not experienced the training house's effects, mental strength was everything in the upper zone. It would naturally be very attractive to the various corporations. In fact, Xueqi also felt tempted to transfer to Haitian City's upper zone. After all, his concentration was currently bottlenecked at the Tier 4 peak standard. Thus far, he had already used 3 phantom potions, yet he was still nowhere near the Tier 5 concentration standard. While Xueqi and Muxin were conversing, an argument suddenly broke out in front of the training house. Lu Tiendi, I've already said my adventurer team will never join you. A fair-skinned girl sporting a double ponytail and wearing light blue sportswear glared at a handsome and dapper young man in his early 20s. Her eyes blazing with indescribable rage. However, the young man in question paid no heed to the girl's anger at all. Instead, a robust middle-aged man standing beside him smiled and said, Miss Ji Luorong, you are free to refuse my young master's invitation, but if you do, you can forget about obtaining resources from anyone in this upper zone from now on. You should understand very clearly that my young master has the power to blacklist you. You! None of the people present dared to refute the middle-aged man's words. In fact, nobody stepped forward to champion the girl. This was because Lu Tiendi was the Starline Corporation's new heir. With the Starline Corporation's influence in Haitian City's upper zone, it would be child's play for it to prevent the upper zone's residents from selling resources to a specific individual. Looking at the girl named Ji Luorong, the middle-aged man chuckled and said, Miss Ji, I advise you to listen obediently to my young master's words and have your entire adventurer team join us. Otherwise, you shouldn't think of staying in Haitian City's upper zone anymore because nobody here will sell you any resources. You shouldn't even think of asking your older sister for help, either. Read latest chapters at Xueqi World. EU. At the middle-aged man's words, many of the corporate children present looked at Ji Luorong sympathetically. In Haitian City's upper zone, even major corporations wouldn't dare to offend the Starline Corporation outright, let alone an individual with no background. If Ji Luorong refused Lu Tiendi's demand, everyone could already foresee the girl having to leave the upper zone shortly after due to a lack of resources. However, as Ji Luorong remained silent, the middle-aged man smiled triumphantly, and the spectating crowd sighed ruefully. A low voice suddenly resounded in the area. Is that so? What if I want to sell resources to this young lady? Chapter 2842. Silent upper zone. A deathly silence suddenly fell over the area as everyone turned toward the voice's origin. What entered everyone's sight was an ordinary-looking young man clad in dark gray casual wear. Besides his ordinary appearance, the young man also felt no different from an ordinary passerby. This person was none other than Xueqi. Although he had grown a lot taller as his physical fitness improved, he still couldn't change his plain appearance. Who is that guy? Isn't he a little too courageous? That guy is dead for sure. Even the successors of the other major corporations here wouldn't dare blatantly refute Lu Tiandi's words. Could this guy be a newcomer to the upper zone? The gathered people were astonished as they looked at Xueqi. They never imagined that such an ignorant person could exist in Haitian City's upper zone. If it were the Starline Corporation of the past, there would still be many people who would dare go against it. They definitely wouldn't let Lu Tiandi, who was merely the corporation's heir, act so arrogantly. Even Lu Xinglua, the corporation's previous heir, hadn't dared behave like Lu Tiandi was behaving now. However, Lu Tiandi's background was different from Lu Xinglua's. Lu Tiandi had caught the eye of one of the middle layer's big shots at a young age and had been secretly nurtured by this big shot since then. Only after Lu Tiandi had replaced Lu Xinglua as the Starline Corporation's new successor had this matter gotten exposed. Due to this revelation, the Starline Corporation's status in Haitian City's upper zone had instantly skyrocketed. Now, even the other major corporations operating in the base layer had no choice but to tuck their tails in front of the Starline Corporation. Otherwise, Xueqi, Lu Tiandi's butler, wouldn't have dared to be so arrogant, openly making such a bold statement in public. Ji Luorong, who had been standing silently in front of the training house all this time, couldn't help turning to Xueqi in surprise and confusion. She never thought that someone would be willing to stand up for her. At the same time though, she couldn't help worrying for Xueqi. This was because she was well aware of Lu Tiandi's extraordinary identity. He was destined to live in the middle layer, and even the Green God Company would have to show him a certain degree of respect. Kid, it seems you're quite courageous, huh? Do you not know who my young master is? Xueqi asked as he looked at Xueqi coldly. Or do you intend to make an enemy of the Starline Corporation? Xueqi had just stated that so long as Lu Tiandi gave the word, nobody in Haitian City's upper zone would dare trade resources with Ji Luorong. Yet, no sooner had he made this declaration than Xueqi announced his intention to trade with Ji Luorong. Xueqi had basically slapped the Starline Corporation's face. Upon hearing Xueqi's words, many people present frowned at Xueqi worriedly. Everyone could tell that Xueqi was up to no good. The middle-aged man was escalating a trivial matter into a problem that concerned the reputation of the entire Starline Corporation. If Xueqi dared to say anything more now, the consequences were unimaginable. He might even face a similar end as Ji Luorong's and get kicked out of the upper zone eventually. After all, it was incredibly difficult to live in the upper zone without resources. When Ji Luorong heard Xueqi's words, she gritted her teeth and resolved to stop Xueqi from championing her. However, just as she was about to take action, a lithe figure suddenly appeared before her. "Little girl, you don't need to worry about him," Mushin said. Looking at Ji Luorong's worried expression, Mushin smiled and continued, "Even the Starline Corporation wouldn't dare do anything against him. Xueqi not only possessed Grade 1 authority in the upper zone, but was also a neutralizing grandmaster. Let alone the measly heir of the Starline Corporation. Even if the Starline Corporation's current owner were here, he wouldn't be able to do anything against Xueqi." Looking at Mushin's dazzling beauty, Ji Luorong could tell that Mushin had an extraordinary background, which should mean that Xueqi did as well. However, she still couldn't help worrying. But, before Ji Luorong could say anything more however, a low voice resounded throughout the area once more. "So what if I am?" These 5 simple words instantly created a commotion among the spectating crowd. Is he crazy? He's actually openly making an enemy of the Starline Corporation? Does he not know what death is? If it were the Starline Corporation of the past, even the upper zone's ordinary corporate children wouldn't fear offending it. After all, they were all residents of the upper zone's base layer. Why should they be afraid of each other? However, the situation was different now that the Starline Corporation had the backing of a middle-layer big shot. That big shot could just make some random excuse and have them removed from the upper zone temporarily. Once they were outside the safe haven known as the upper zone, the Starline Corporation would have plenty of means to deal with them. Upon hearing Xueqi's response, Xueqi was momentarily dumbfounded as well. After snapping out of his daze, he bellowed, "Punk! It seems you really are itching for a beating. In that case, I'll help you loosen those bones of yours." Although the Green God Company prohibited fighting in the upper zone, the company would turn a blind eye to small conflicts in private settings. So long as one did not go too far, the Green God Company wouldn't look too deeply into the matter. After all, disputes were bound to occur wherever people gathered. However, if anyone dared to take things too far, the Green God Company was bound to dish out a severe penalty. In fact, many corporations and forces had gotten banished from the upper zone and suffered an early demise because they had crossed this line. Hence, nobody would dare to openly defy the Green God Company's rules. The next moment, Xueqi stomped his right foot on the ground, and his body shot forward like a cannonball. The impact of his feet shook the ground slightly and even left a deep footprint behind on the cement. As his body shot forward, Xueqi punched, perfectly integrating his fist speed with the speed of his moving body. His fist generated explosive noises due to this perfect combination as it collided with the air. Evidently, his punch had already exceeded the speed of sound. A sonic boom. He's a Honglian Grandmaster. When everyone heard the explosive noises, they stared at Xueqi in shock. The upper zone's environment allowed one to develop one's physical fitness rapidly. In fact, even developing one's physical fitness to the standard of a Honglian Master or a half-step Honglian Grandmaster wouldn't be a problem. However, those who could actually overcome the final hurdle and become a Honglian Grandmaster were incredibly rare. Even in the upper zone, such people were considered top-tier experts and treated as VIPs by major corporations. These corporations would even be willing to grant a Honglian Grandmaster the position of elder to rope in such individuals. This was because every Honglian Grandmaster was no different from a humanoid beast. Hence, everyone couldn't believe that Xueqi was serving as a mere butler of a corporation's successor, despite being a Honglian Grandmaster. Let alone the spectators, even Mushin was astonished by this situation. Only two people weren't surprised by this situation: Lu Tiandi and Ji Luorong. It's over. Ji Luorong reflexively shut her eyes at this sight. She had found out that Xueqi was a Honglian Grandmaster only because Xueqi himself had revealed his strength to her during one of their previous meetings. Hence, she knew that Xueqi wasn't just an ordinary butler but was also a terrifying bodyguard. If Xuefeng got struck by Xueqi's punch, he would be fortunate to leave with only a few broken bones. It wouldn't be strange if he ended up hospitalized for half a month. Boom! The next moment, as if a grenade had exploded, the sound of an explosion echoed throughout the area. Even those standing over a dozen meters away felt the intense impact. Almost everyone present shut their eyes subconsciously. After all, they could easily imagine the outcome that awaited those struck by a Honglian Grandmaster. If a Honglian Grandmaster managed to land a square blow, they could kill a bull with one hit. Even a neutralizing Grandmaster would end up with broken bones if they got struck by a Honglian Grandmaster. Meanwhile, the sound of an impact meant that Xueqi's punch landed on Xuefeng. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. However, when everyone opened their eyes again, they were dumbfounded. How is this possible? At this time, not only was Xuefeng completely intact, but he had actually caught Xueqi's iron fist with just one hand. Xueqi himself was surprised by this situation. He never thought that his punch would meet with such a result. You've made your move. Holding on to Xueqi's fist, Xuefeng looked at the middle-aged man and asked calmly, "Is it my turn now?" Chapter 2843. Shocking the upper zone. Xuefeng's words seemed to stimulate Xueqi, the latter's face immediately turning ashen. Xueqi was indeed surprised that Xuefeng had blocked his punch, but that was merely because he had not expected that Xuefeng would actually be a neutralizing Grandmaster. Moreover, although his previous punch seemed fierce and domineering, he had actually used only about half of his strength. After all, he would be in big trouble if he created too much of a scene. At that time, even Lu Tiandi wouldn't be able to protect him. However, Xueqi never thought that Xuefeng would take advantage of this fact and turn him into a laughingstock in the eyes of the crowd. He was a dignified Honglian Grandmaster. Even the owners of international corporations would have to be polite to him and treat him as a VIP when meeting him. As for neutralizing Grandmasters, they could only cower in fear in front of him. He had never once suffered such humiliation before. "You bastard!" Xueqi took a step forward and punched with his other hand. Half-step collapsing punch. This time, Xueqi did not hold back at all. The only thing on his mind was to make Xuefeng regret his words. Xuefeng responded to this second attack in a similar manner, extending his other hand to catch the punch. He didn't seem to have noticed that Xueqi's present punch was different from the one before. Upon seeing this, Xueqi sneered. A punch carrying 50% of his strength indeed wouldn't pose a threat to a neutralizing grandmaster. A neutralizing grandmaster could easily block the attack by relying on technique. However, it was a different story for a punch carrying his full strength. A neutralizing grandmaster who tried blocking such an attack would definitely end up with broken bones. Yet, Xuefeng was ignorantly trying to receive his punch using the exact same method. Boom! A loud explosion rang out as Xueqi's fist collided with Xuefeng's palm. The shock wave generated by the impact this time was much stronger than before. Nevertheless, Xueqi was still dumbfounded as he looked at Xuefeng. This was because the result of his second punch was exactly the same as his first. Xuefeng had still caught his fist without fail. Did I subconsciously hold back in fear of getting into trouble? Inevitably, such a thought occurred to Xueqi. After all, this was the only reasonable explanation he could think of for this situation. Otherwise, how could a neutralizing grandmaster possibly receive his full-powered punch? However, Xuefeng did not give Xueqi any time to react at all. Immediately, he pushed Xueqi's hands aside and executed a palm strike on the latter's chest. The palm strike was so fast that the attack had already connected with Xueqi's chest before he realized what was going on. However, even after noticing the attack, Xueqi paid no attention to it at all. As a Hanglian grandmaster, he had long since developed an instinctual defensive mechanism. Whenever his body received an attack, his muscles would tighten, giving them a toughness resembling steel and neutralizing the attack's impact. If neutralizing grandmasters were proud of their techniques, then Hanglian grandmasters were proud of their physical body's toughness. In simpler terms, a Hanglian grandmaster was someone trained to take hits and dish out devastating blows. Even if a Hanglian grandmaster managed to land only 1 out of 100 attacks on a neutralizing grandmaster, this one attack would end the fight instantly. Boom! Xueqi stood steadily even after receiving Xuefeng's palm strike. He also looked at Xuefeng in silent contempt. Nobody present found it surprising that Xuefeng's attack had no effect on Xueqi, either. This was because Hanglian grandmasters were precisely this powerful. They were truly monsters in human skin, and trying to harm these monsters with the hands and feet of ordinary humans was an utter joke. This was also why the various major corporations in the upper zone would desperately try to recruit or befriend Hanglian grandmasters. Kid, I admit that you're strong. However, you can't hurt me. Patting his clothes, Xueqi said disdainfully. On the other hand, how long do you think your stamina can hold out against my attacks? A neutralizing grandmaster's ability to exert complete control over their physical body was indeed extraordinary. However, when it came to stamina, a neutralizing grandmaster was far from comparable to a Hanglian grandmaster. A Hanglian grandmaster could fight 3 days and 3 nights without rest. In contrast, a neutralizing grandmaster would be fortunate to last even half a day. Hence, neutralizing grandmasters would frequently curse Hanglian grandmasters as merely a bunch of simple-minded brutes with well-developed bodies. Spectating from the sidelines, Muxin grew worried when she saw this situation. She never thought that Lu Tiandi would have a Hanglian grandmaster as his bodyguard. The Boulder Corporation had to pay a great price just to get a Hanglian grandmaster to become one of its elders. Moreover, apart from the Boulder Corporation's master, everyone else in the corporation treated this Hanglian grandmaster with awe and respect. Yet, Lu Tiandi actually had such a powerful expert working as his henchman. It was ineffective? Xuefeng also couldn't help looking at Xueqi in surprise. Ever since his concentration had reached the Tier 4 peak standard, his control over his body in the real world had improved by a significant margin. After factoring in his improved physical fitness, he now even dared to apply some of the techniques he used in God's domain in the world. This was also why Xuefeng had provoked Xueqi. He was very curious to find out where his current limits lay. When Xuefeng was catching Xueqi's second punch, he hadn't just caught the attack with an open palm. Instead, he had executed 3 rapid palm strikes against Xueqi's fist. In other words, he had used the 3 extreme slashes technique, a simplified version of Miracle Dragon's 6 extreme slashes. As Xuefeng had executed his 3 palm strikes against Xueqi's fist almost in the same instant, it was practically impossible for the human body to tell that it wasn't just 1 but 3 separate attacks. Thus, Xuefeng had succeeded in blocking Xueqi's full-powered punch. Otherwise, even if his physical fitness had improved a lot after he began living in the upper zone, he would still have to avoid Xueqi's full-powered attack. Meanwhile, the offensive palm strike Xuefeng executed against Xueqi was currently his strongest attack. 4 extreme slashes. From an outsider's perspective, Xuefeng's attack would look like an ordinary palm strike. In reality, his attack consisted of 4 palm strikes executed in rapid succession on the same location. This attack placed a heavy burden on his mental strength, and he couldn't use it a second time even if he wanted to. Looking at Xuefeng's surprised expression, Xueqi smiled. "Kid. Now it's my turn." Just when Xueqi thought to attack again, his body suddenly stiffened, and he collapsed to the ground willy-nilly. His breathing became stifled, and he had difficulty even speaking. In fact, even his vision started to blur. These abrupt changes discombobulated Xueqi. He couldn't understand what was happening at all. "You. What the hell did you do to me?" Struggling to lift his head, Xueqi gaped at Xuefeng in confusion. He simply couldn't wrap his mind around how Xuefeng had managed to injure him so severely with just a palm strike. Now, he found even standing up from the ground difficult. The spectators were likewise surprised when they saw Xueqi collapse to the ground. He defeated a Honglian grandmaster in one strike? Who is this guy? At this time, the onlookers eyed Xuefeng as if he were a monster. They even began wondering whether the scene before them was staged. After all, who could possibly believe that a Honglian grandmaster would fall from just one palm strike? "I think I know who he is." Some time ago, 2 people managed to pass Yuantian City's mental path together. One of these people was even someone the Boulder Corporation brought in using its reserve slots. According to the rumors, that person was Zero Wing's guild leader, Black Flame. Although this guy looks different from God's Domain's Black Flame, they should be the same person. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Ew, what? He's the guy responsible for dragging down the Starline Corporation's Lu Xinglua? Among the crowd, some people who kept tabs on Yuantian City's upper zone recognized Xuefeng. For a time, the street bubbled with commotion. Nobody had thought that Black Flame, the mythical sword emperor of God's domain, would actually appear in their upper zone. Moreover, the man had even defeated a Honglian grandmaster with a single palm strike. His strength was simply terrifying. "So, he is the Black Flame Big Sis told me about?" Ji Luorong gaped in shock as she looked at Xuefeng. After all, Black Flame was currently rumored to be the strongest person in God's domain right now. He was in existence even the 5 great super guilds had to tiptoe around. Chapter 2844. God's Domain's Black Flame. So, that's why he dared to stand against Lu Tiendi. He's the one responsible for Lu Xinglua's removal. Lu Tiendi will probably have to tread cautiously around him. Amazing! As expected of Black Flame. I never thought that he would be the person who received Grade 1 authority in Yuantian City recently. This is interesting. It seems Lu Tiendi has met his match. Everybody present knew of Black Flame, but they did not know much about Black Flame's identity in the real world. After all, they had many things they needed to handle. How could they possibly have the time to look into the real-world identity of every famous expert in God's domain? Only if they were particularly interested in a specific person would they spend some money to commission a detailed investigation. Not to mention, Black Flame was someone who had never publicly declared his God's domain identity in the real world. This made it even more difficult to investigate his situation. Only superpowers that paid close attention to Zero Wing would know of Black Flame's identity. While most people did not know of Black Flame's identity in the real world, it was a different story for the name Black Flame itself. This name was far too well known in God's domain. Not only was this name involved in many iconic battles in the game, but it was also behind the creation of many miracles. In fact, many of Black Flame's battle videos had circulated through the various kingdoms and empires forums and were regarded as a paradigm for swordsmen. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that almost every player operating on the Eastern continent would know Black Flame's name. Needless to say, residents of upper zones like themselves, who were expert players in God's domain, would definitely know of Black Flame. Although Zero Wing started out as a guild with no backing or background, it was now publicly recognized as a superpower. Compared to the various superpowers that had relied on powerful organizations to gain their strength, the influence Zero Wing had over the public was many times greater. In fact, Zero Wing's influence over the virtual gaming industry almost rivaled the 5 great super guilds already. Zero Wing had already become an absolute titan in God's domain. Thus, Ji Luorong felt like she was dreaming when she looked at Xueqi. While the onlookers were discussing quietly among themselves, Lu Tiandi, who had been silently spectating the situation all this time, suddenly approached Xueqi. "It seems I have been impolite. I didn't think that you would be Zero Wing's guild leader, Black Flame," Lu Tiandi said as he looked at Xueqi with a friendly smile. He also gave off an indescribably calm feeling, betraying no anger over Xueqi having heavily injured his butler. "Hello, my name is Lu Tiandi, the current guild leader of Starlink. You have truly helped me a bunch by defeating Lu Xinglua, guild leader Black Flame. Otherwise, I would most likely have to expend a lot of time and effort to take over Starlink." "No need for thanks. You and I are not allies," Xueqi retorted nonchalantly. Others might not know about Lu Tiandi, but Xueqi had a very deep understanding of him. This was because Lu Tiandi had been a well-known Tier 6 God-ranked expert in the past. However, he had not joined any guild. Instead, he had led an adventurer team while working under Starlink. Although Lu Tiandi appeared friendly on the surface, he was deep down a very conniving person. He had toyed with many powers in the past. These powers had worked for Lu Tiandi only to get backstabbed. For this reason, many superpowers had detested Lu Tiandi. However, because of Lu Tiandi's extraordinary strength and his tremorous clown adventurer team, one of God's domain's 7 great dark adventurer teams, none of the various superpowers could do anything against him. "Guild leader Black Flame, must you be so unapproachable? Lu Xinglua and I are 2 different people. There are many people within the corporation who dislike Lu Xinglua for his overbearing and arrogant attitude as well. However, he is, after all, the patriarch's son. Even if others have an opinion regarding his behavior, nobody dares to say anything. Guild leader Black Flame's dragging Lu Xinglua off his pedestal is an event worth celebrating for the Starline Corporation," Lu Tiandi said, chuckling. "Since Miss Ji is your friend, Guild leader Black Flame, I will naturally stop trying to recruit her. Also, I have admired Zero Wing for a long time now. May I know if you are willing to form a partnership with me? To present Starlink's sincerity in this partnership and apologize for my rudeness to Miss Ji, I can sell a large batch of phantom potions to you and Miss Ji at cost on behalf of Starlink. May I know what you think of this, Guild leader Black Flame?" At Lu Tiandi's words, everyone couldn't help envying Xueqi. The phantom potion was something the various major corporations coveted. Let alone at cost, they would even be willing to buy the phantom potion at double or triple the original price. After all, the importance of improving one's mental strength trumped everything else in the upper zone. Ji Luorong was tempted by Lu Tiandi's offer. She currently held only Grade 2 authority in Haitian City's upper zone. If she could acquire a few more phantom potions and improve her mental strength, she might reach Grade 1 authority. At that time, she would have a much easier time operating in the upper zone. After all, only around 300 people held Grade 1 authority in Haitian City's upper zone, and the Green God Company placed heavy importance on every one of them. At that time, even if a corporation in the upper zone wished to target her, they would face incredible difficulty. She also wouldn't be tight for resources, as the tasks offered to Grade 1 authority holders would sometimes award phantom potions. "Thank you for your goodwill, Guild Leader Lu. But Zero Wing already has its own collaborators. Currently, Zero Wing has no plans to cooperate with more guilds, so there is nothing I can do about this," Xueqi said, directly rejecting Lu Tiandi's offer. "If there is nothing else, we will be taking our leave now. If that's the case, then it truly is a pity." Sighing, Lu Tiandi said, "If you have any intentions of forming a partnership in the future, feel free to contact me anytime, Guild Leader Black Flame." Xueqi responded to these words with just a polite smile. He then turned around and left the training house together with Ji Luorong and Muxin. The spectating crowd also dispersed, leaving Lu Tiandi and Yi Kuei alone. After the crowd dispersed, Yi Kuei made a full recovery after consuming a life potion. Looking at Xueqi's departing back, Yi Kuei said in a quiet voice, "Young master, Black Flame is simply too arrogant. You already extended such a sincere invitation to him, yet he actually refused to show you any respect. It's no wonder he managed to anger Lu Xinglua that much. Should I find an opportunity to teach that kid a lesson?" Yi Kuei was furious over Xueqi's successful surprise attack on him. Had he been a little more careful earlier, he definitely wouldn't have suffered such a serious injury. Moreover, He had also noticed that Xueqi looked a little pale after attacking him. Xueqi had probably suffered a significant backlash from his own attack. If that were the case, landing a fatal blow on Xueqi would have been entirely possible. I don't know why, but he seems to be extremely wary of me, although this is clearly our first meeting. It seems it'll be impossible to use him for our own purposes. If that's the case, let's teach him a small lesson. However, I'm afraid you alone won't be enough, Lu Tiandi said, shaking his head. That Xueqi actually managed to execute Miracle Dragon's trademark move in the real world. Evidently, he has reached an incredibly high level in both his physical fitness and mental strength. It'll be tough for you to take care of him by yourself. I'll ask Brother Wang to accompany you. You'll have Mr. Wang come as well? Xueqi was momentarily surprised by Lu Tiandi's words. However, he quickly revealed an ecstatic expression and said, "If this is the case, that kid is dead." Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The brother Wang Lu Tiandi mentioned was a Honglian grandmaster who was only half a step away from becoming a mental strength master. He was also Lu Tiandi's senior brother, and a resident of the upper zone's middle layer. It would be child's play for such an expert to take action against someone living in the base layer. By the way, when you head back, notify the others in the team to take action against Ji Luorong's adventurer team immediately. Make sure to destroy them as quickly as possible, Lu Tiandi instructed calmly. Since I can't have Ji Luorong's adventurer team, there's no reason why I should let Xueqi have it. Rest assured, young master. We have long since been keeping track of those people. If not for your love of talent, they would have been doomed already, Xueqi responded, smiling. Nodding, Lu Tiandi then entered the mental strength training house. Chapter 2845. Soon to break seal Haitian City Upper Zone, Northern Mountain Villa Community. Xueqi couldn't help doubting his eyes as he stared at the three-story mansion before him. You've been living in this place all this time? Xueqi asked as he looked at Ji Luorong strangely. The mansion before him not only looked luxurious but also occupied an area as large as 2 basketball courts. It was even larger than the Boulder Corporation's mansion in Yuantian City's upper zone, which had cost 30 million trade points to exchange. Meanwhile, Ji Luorong lacked both influence and authority in the upper zone. In fact, she was even living in the upper zone by herself. Apart from her family's corporation operating in the outside world, she did not possess any backers or background whatsoever. Hence, Xueqi found it truly hard to believe that she had managed to purchase such a large mansion. Even Mu Xin was a little surprised by this situation. After all, the base layer's mansions couldn't be bought by just anyone with sufficient points. Normally, one also needed to have grade 1 authority or above. However, from the information she obtained on Ji Luorong's background, the latter had only grade 2 authority. This is the mansion my maternal grandfather left behind, Ji Luorong said, nodding. Because of my family's decline, we had no choice but to live in the outside world. However, because my mental strength showed promise, my family decided to make use of the reserve slot my maternal grandfather left behind and let me live in the upper zone. Realization immediately dawned upon Xueqi at Ji Luorong's explanation. This also explained why Phoenix Rain had been living in the outside world despite her family having such a large mansion in the upper zone. The upper zone had existed for a long time already. During this period, there had indeed been many families that had fallen into obscurity and were forced to leave the upper zone. After all, the strong preyed upon the weak in the upper zone. Without a reserve slot or sufficient talent in the mental strength department, one would not qualify for residency in the upper zone at all. Through this revelation, Xueqi also realized that the Ji family was indeed extraordinary. Although it was in decline now, the fact that it had managed to acquire such an extravagant mansion in the upper zone proved that it had once been a powerful force there. This also explained how Phoenix Rain managed to rely on her own strength to become one of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's pavilion masters. As Ji Luorong talked about her family circumstances, the group arrived inside the mansion. Upon entering the mansion, Xueqi had to admit that it was indeed much better than his housing unit. Not only was the place much more spacious, but it also provided much greater help toward the improvement of one's mental strength. Xueqi doubted that the team even had a single Tier 4 player in its ranks right now. Hence, he found it inconceivable that Lu Tiandi wished to annex eternal glory. Of course, Xueqi wasn't looking down on Ji Luorong and her companions. The present Tremorous Clown was far stronger than Eternal Glory. Tremorous Clown probably rivaled the average superpower in the number of its peak combatants. Now that Lu Tiendi had acquired Starlink as well, the overall strength of the forces under his command should be at an astonishing level. My team is indeed incapable of catching Lu Tiendi's attention. The only reason I can think of for his efforts to annex us is the special legacy we obtained, Ji Luorong said after giving the matter some thought. Some time ago, we visited a very special secret land and found a massive world passage sealed there. We even came across a person who might be a Tier 6 god. According to that person, the seal on the world passage would soon break, and the War of Worlds would soon begin. Our team received a special legacy from that person. Recorded inside the legacy was a sealing magic array. If we sacrifice EXP to the magic array, we can isolate a specific area from the rest of the world for a long period. It can be considered a means to resist the War of Worlds. However, at that time, other players aside from our team entered that place as well. In hindsight, those people might have been Tremorous Clown's members. Ji Luorong's words shocked Xuefeng. This was because he had never heard of a War of Worlds happening at this stage of the game in his previous life. However, he also doubted that Ji Luorong was lying. After all, he had visited the ancient god's domain. He wouldn't find it strange if there were other timelines of God's domain. This was especially true after seeing 100 Ghosts as members. Those people clearly didn't come from the ancient God's domain, but most likely were from another interstellar continent. This so-called War of Worlds was probably a great war between Earth's players and the said interstellar continent's players. If this was true, it would be a disaster for Earth's God's domain. After all, in terms of resources and experts, the interstellar continent's God's domain was far superior to Earth's God's domain. If the two sides were to wage war against each other, it wouldn't take a genius to imagine that Earth's side would suffer a catastrophic defeat, with many superpowers getting annihilated. Even the present Zero Wing would have a difficult time facing the interstellar continent's offensive. This explained why Lu Tiendi wanted Ji Luorong's adventurer team to join Tremorous Clown. After all, the ability to isolate an area from the outside world would be of significant help to a guild in the upcoming war. When Muxin heard Ji Luorong's words, her complexion darkened. Muxin did not doubt that the War of Worlds would happen. This was because of information Frost Heaven obtained from investigating 100 Ghosts. Previously, she had still been questioning the validity of this information. However, after listening to Ji Luorong's tale, everything made sense. Yet, she couldn't bring herself to be happy about this discovery. Frost Heaven had gone to great lengths to secure one of the reserve seats for God's Domain's 12 great guilds. Yet, just when the guild was about to usher in an era of rapid development, the War of Worlds was about to begin. This was an absolute nightmare for Frost Heaven. However, Muxin felt a little fortunate. If she hadn't chosen to accompany Xuefeng to Haitian City's upper zone, she would have most likely remained ignorant about this upcoming world-shaking change. If Frost Heaven did not prepare for the War of Worlds, it wouldn't be strange if the guild got annihilated. While Muxin was pondering Frost Heaven's future, Xuefeng looked at Ji Luorong and said earnestly, "Luorong, now that Lu Tiendi has set his sights on you and you have even rejected his offer, with his personality, I'm afraid it won't be long before he takes action against your team. It is no longer suitable for you to remain in Haitian City's upper zone. It will be safer if you move to another upper zone. I have a housing unit in Yuantian City's upper zone. Although it isn't comparable to this mansion, you can still conduct daily exercises there. Would you like to move there?" Xuefeng knew Lu Tiendi's personality better than anyone. Lu Tiendi would eliminate anyone he deemed his enemy. With the Starline Corporation's present influence over Haitian City's upper zone, Ji Luorong definitely couldn't live there in peace. Only by leaving Haitian City's upper zone would Ji Luorong escape Lu Tiendi's clutches. Go to Yuantian City's upper zone? Inevitably, Ji Luorong hesitated. However, she also knew that Xuefeng was right. Living in Haitian City's upper zone would no longer be safe. "Miss Ji, if you find it inconvenient to live with guild leader Xuefeng, you are welcome to live with me. Although the Boulder Corporation isn't as powerful as the Starline Corporation, we have established a solid foundation in Yuantian City's upper zone," Muxin invited. "Miss Muxin, you misunderstand. I don't find it inconvenient. I am already very satisfied to be able to live in Yuantian City's upper zone," Ji Luorong said, shaking her head. "I am just worried about my friends. They don't live in the upper zone. If Lu Tiendi targets them, I'm afraid they won't be able to hide from him for very long. If it were before, when God's domain still didn't hold such great importance to the various corporations, she wouldn't have to worry about the Starline Corporation secretly taking action against her companions. However, the situation was different now. Because of the extreme importance the Green God Company placed on God's domain, the various major corporations now prioritized the game. Chapter 2846. Frightening headquarters. The sun was setting, and the sky was growing darker. Originally, this was a time when countless office workers would be getting off work and going home. However, the lights of Zero Wing Tower remained brightly lit. Compared to the buildings around it, the tower looked much livelier, with many people coming and going from it. There was even a long queue of young men and women waiting outside the entrance to take the basic tests for joining Zero Wing. At this time, a group of several dozen people of various origins and clad in diverse styles suddenly appeared in front of the tower and quietly studied the tall building before them with curious expressions. "So this is Zero Wing's headquarters?" A young man with freckles on his face said in disdain as he looked at the line of young men and women waiting outside the building. "I really wonder what's gotten into the commander. Why does she want us to train in Zero Wing's headquarters all of a sudden?" Although Zero Wing is a powerful guild in God's domain, the number of peak experts it actually has isn't a lot. These people trying to join Zero Wing are obviously newbies as well. I bet they can't clear the trial tower's 3rd floor. Yet, the commander actually wants us to train with Zero Wing? None of the group objected to the youth's derisive remarks. It was evident that they agreed with him. As people who had chosen to join an adventurer team, the thing they disliked the most was being tied down by various restrictions. Hence, they also held players who joined guilds in extreme contempt, considering guild players to be basically weaklings who feared the strong but bullied the weak. In comparison, every member of their adventurer team could become a core member of a guild, even a super guild, should they choose to join one. This was because they had honed their combat techniques through fighting powerful monsters and various outdoor PvPs without relying on any background or backer. They were completely different from the experts pampered and cultivated by guilds. Moreover, they were also incredibly strong in real-world combat, much stronger than the fighting champions frequently mentioned on TV. This was also why they felt that going out of their way to train with Zero Wing was a complete waste of their time. However, the middle-aged man leading the group shot a glance at the freckled youth and said coldly, "Enough, Tiantong. This is the commander's order. Either you go to Zero Wing or leave the team. Do you wish to leave the team?" The freckled youth named Tiantong no longer dared complain. Although he was still unreconciled to the situation, he did not dare defy the middle-aged man. Similarly, everyone else in the group held their tongue, nobody daring to voice any opinions. This was because this middle-aged man wearing a black shirt was not only Crimson Mask, the Eternal Glory Adventurer Team's vice-commander, but also the strongest person in the Adventurer Team. He was so powerful that even if everyone in their Adventurer Team, including their commander, Ji Luorong, banded together, they would just barely be able to hold their ground against him. On the Western continent, he was also known to many as Crimson Mask the Demon. In one instance, in order to save a companion cornered by a large guild, he had charged into a map sealed off by an army of 10,000 all by himself. This army had over 1,000 Tier 3 experts, yet not only had this 10,000-man army gotten routed, but none of the 10,000 players had managed to leave the map alive, either. After this battle, the nickname Crimson Mask the Demon began to spread across the continent. As a result, Eternal Glory had a much easier time operating out in the fields. Moreover, Crimson Mask possessed an extraordinary identity even in the real world. He used to be very famous in the bodyguard industry. Many international corporations had sought to employ him. However, for some reason, he had suddenly retired as a bodyguard to become a full-time gamer, thoroughly investing his life in God's domain. As for his decision to join Eternal Glory, which had been a weak adventurer team back then, that had simply been an accident. After seeing that everyone had quieted down, Crimson Mask nodded and led the group into Zero Wing Tower's lobby. As soon as Crimson Mask and the others entered the lobby, a beautiful woman with shoulder-length hair in sportswear approached their group. The core member's emblem pinned on her top indicated that she was a member of Zero Wing. When this woman appeared, Eternal Glory's members automatically raised their guard. The expression of Crimson Mask in particular turned grave when he saw her. This was because the pressure and presence this woman gave off were simply too powerful. Although the woman did not exude any kind of aura, they couldn't help feeling nervous for some reason when standing in her presence. Faced with this feeling, ordinary people would most likely think nothing of it. However, as players who had fought in numerous life-and-death battles in God's domain, Eternal Glory's members had long since honed their intuition beyond that of ordinary people. Anyone capable of making them feel nervous definitely wasn't an ordinary person. Eyeing the woman approaching them, Crimson Mask inwardly calculated his chances of winning should he fight her. However, after a round of careful observation, he was surprised to conclude that he had only an even chance of victory, and this was only because his physique was stronger. Could she be Fire Dance, the commander of Zero Wing's main force? No matter how Crimson Mask thought about the situation, this was the only possibility he could think of. Otherwise, he couldn't explain why this woman before him gave him such immense pressure. "You must be Eternal Glory's members, right?" the woman said, smiling as she scanned the group before her. "You can call me Turtle Dove. I've already heard about your situation from the guild leader. Since you have come to Zero Wing, you can treat Zero Wing as your home from now on. Your rooms are ready, so you can go there and rest whenever you want." After saying so, Turtle Dove led Crimson Mask and the others toward the elevator to the residential area. Turtle Dove. While following after Turtle Dove, Crimson Mask and the others revealed confused expressions. This was especially true for Crimson Mask. Before going to Zero Wing's headquarters, he had looked into the peak experts under Zero Wing's command. However, there was no one named Turtle Dove on the list. Even Tier 4 experts don't give off such powerful mental pressure. Could she be one of the trump cards Zero Wing is secretly cultivating? Tian Tong was also inwardly surprised when he looked at Turtle Dove. Tian Tong had met many experts, but this was the first time he had come across someone capable of giving such powerful pressure in the real world. Moreover, this was merely a pressure Turtle Dove was radiating subconsciously. Only those who had experienced countless harsh battles and training would develop such a temperament and aura. This was something even Crimson Mask had yet to accomplish even now. Crimson Mask was incredibly strong. He could defeat even master martial artists in a few moves. Despite his strength, Tian Tong had never felt such pressure coming from the middle-aged man. As the group was waiting to enter the spacious elevator, two men walked out of it. These two men were clad in sportswear similar to Turtle Dove's. They also wore the emblem for Zero Wing's core members on their tops. The instant these two young men appeared, Crimson Mask and the others broke out in a cold sweat. This was because, in their eyes, the two men that just exited the elevator were no different from beasts. Even someone with dull senses would feel a chill crawl down their spine when bathed in the violent auras and oppressive feeling the two men exuded. Moreover, the two were incredibly fit as well. In fact, they were even superior to Crimson Mask. However, the presence of these two young men did not cause any of the Zero Wing members nearby any trouble. Instead, these Zero Wing members acted as if they did not see these two people, with some of them even chatting and laughing among themselves. What's wrong with these people? Tian Tong was flabbergasted when he saw the behavior of the Zero Wing members around him. Can they not sense this oppressive feeling at all? Right now, Tian Tong felt as if a lion was baring its fangs and claws at him, as if death itself was staring at him. If an ordinary person were subjected to such a feeling for long periods, they might even go crazy. Yet, Zero Wing's members seemed oblivious to this oppressive feeling. Looking at the two departing men, Crimson Mask couldn't help asking Turtle Dove, "Miss Turtle Dove, may I know who those two people are?" The instant those two young men exited the elevator, Crimson Mask had the feeling that he was doomed. This was because both of those young men were evidently stronger than him. If the two of them attacked him together, he wouldn't even have a chance to retaliate. "Their Shadow Sword and Flying Shadow," Turtle Dove answered calmly. "Because they have been improving quite slowly recently, Big Sis Fire has been scolding them a lot. Currently, the two of them must train with Master Lei Bao for 2 hours every day. Otherwise, they will be prohibited from entering God's domain." Slow improvement? Turtle Dove's words rendered Tian Tong speechless. She must be boasting. Yes, Turtle Dove is definitely boasting. After all, who could possibly find two guys who are both stronger than Crimson Mask to be lacking? However, when Tian Tong and the others finished settling into their rooms and visited Zero Wing's training room, they discovered that Zero Wing's headquarters was basically a den of monsters. This was because they witnessed Shadow Sword and Flying Shadow getting beaten up and yelled at by a sultry beauty dressed in a red t-shirt and shorts. The two young men were utterly incapable of fighting back at all. From an outsider's perspective, it looked as if an adult was beating up two children. While Eternal Glory's members were training in Zero Wing's headquarters, Shifeng's group arrived back in Yuantian City's upper zone. Muxin promptly bade farewell to Shifeng and returned to the Boulder Corporation's mansion. She intended to report the matter of the War of Worlds to the Guild and begin preparations for it as soon as possible. As for Ji Luorong, she arrived at Shifeng's residential unit. To her surprise, there were actually two big sisters sharing the residential unit. Neither of these two big sisters was inferior to her older sister in appearance. This was especially true for Gentle Snow. She was basically a goddess who had descended to the mortal world. Moreover, these two big sisters were incredibly strong and knowledgeable in combat as well. When the two of them saw Ji Luorong going through her daily training, not only were they able to point out her flaws in the blink of an eye, but their advice was also easy to understand. Yuantian City's upper zone, in a restaurant a short distance away from Shifeng's residential unit. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Xueqi stood respectfully beside a burly young man and reported carefully, "Mr. Wang, according to my investigation, Black Flame and that little girl are living in that residential area. However, they are currently remaining in their house, so it isn't suitable to take action now. I'm afraid I'll have to waste some of your time." "No need for that much trouble." Chuckling, the youth named Wang Xianming said nonchalantly, "That's merely an ordinary residential area. Besides, it's just teaching a neutralizing grandmaster a lesson. I can just sneak in at midnight. I guarantee that none of the surveillance systems in place will notice me." "Then, I'll have to trouble you with that, Mr. Wang." Ikuei did not doubt Wang Xuanming's claim. Those surveillance systems might be able to stop him, but they definitely couldn't stop someone like Wang Xianming. Of course, it would be a different story if Shifeng were living in a mansion. Unfortunately, Shifeng was only living in an ordinary residential area, and the level of security in such a place wasn't particularly amazing. Chapter 2847. Den of Monsters? The night was quiet, and the moon hung high in the sky. Apart from the streetlights, no other light source shone in the 6th Southern District. It was evident that the people living in this residential area had already gone to bed. Outside the residential area, Ikuei approached Wang Xianming, who was all in black, and reported carefully, "Mr. Wang, all the houses in the residential area have already turned off their lights. Only a few monitoring facilities are still operating there. In addition, we found 32 enforcement robots patrolling the area. They do not follow any set patrol routes." The reason the upper zone was incredibly safe wasn't just the Green God Company's absolute authority in the upper zone. Apart from that, there was also the fact that anyone who had lived here for some time would gain a physique rivaling that of Honglian masters in the outside world. Moreover, while the upper zone prioritized mental strength above all, every resident living in the upper zone still possessed exceptionally high combat standards. Defeating such people within a short period would be incredibly difficult. Most importantly, enforcement robots constantly patrolled every corner of the upper zone. Not only did these enforcement robots operate using state-of-the-art artificial intelligence, but their bodies were also made of titanium alloy and other special alloys. Even if they received a hit from a cannon of ancient times, they would, at most, suffer minor damage, although it was highly unlikely that a cannon could ever land a hit on these enforcement robots. This was because these robots possessed inhuman reaction speeds and physiques. Thanks to these factors, they could rival neutralizing grandmasters. Before these enforcement robots, both neutralizing grandmasters and Honglian grandmasters were nothing. Hence, Honglian grandmasters dared not take any covert action in the upper zone. At most, they would openly cross hands with their opponents. This frightening technology was exclusive to the Green God Company, and was one reason the various corporations worldwide feared the Green God Company so much. 32. Nodding, Wang Xianming said, "Okay. Give me a map of their general location." Wang Xianming was not the slightest bit surprised to find so many enforcement robots in a residential area. In fact, this number was significantly lower than what mansion districts would boast. Even an ordinary mansion district would have at least 200 enforcement robots on patrol at all times. The security there was truly impeccable. It was only because Shifeng was living in an ordinary residential area that Wang Xianming had an opportunity to take action. Even then, Wang Xianming was only confident of teaching Shifeng a small lesson and heavily injuring him. This was because these enforcement robots were incredibly fast. The first enforcement robot would arrive within 8 seconds of the moment he broke into Xueqi's house. This was also the basic arrangement for ordinary residential areas. Hence, after Wang Xianming factored in the time he needed to escape, he concluded that he only had a very short time to do battle. If he delayed too long and got discovered by an enforcement robot, he shouldn't even think of escaping. As for putting up a fight against the enforcement robots, that was simply suicidal. These are the locations of the 32 robots 10 seconds ago, Xueqi said as he transferred the data to Wang Xuanming's quantum watch. Immediately, 32 red dots appeared on the map displayed on Wang Xuanming's watch. After glancing at the map, Wang Xianming smiled and said, "It seems Xia Qingying is treating this guy quite well. With this distribution, I'll only have 7 seconds to conclude the operation." 7 seconds? Xueqi frowned at Wang Xuanming's estimate. How about I attract the attention of those robots? There might only be a 1-second difference between 7 seconds and 8 seconds, but a Honglian Grandmaster could cross a distance of several dozen meters in 1 second. Hence, 1 second was by no means a short period. Relax. Grinning, Wang Xianming said, "Let alone this residential area, I've infiltrated even more dangerous places than this in the past. 7 seconds is more than enough for me already." If an ordinary Honglian Grandmaster were taking action, 7 seconds would indeed be insufficient for them to injure a neutralizing Grandmaster and escape without getting caught. Not to mention, Xueqi was a neutralizing Grandmaster who had achieved an incredibly high standard in his mental strength. The control he had over his body was far superior to the average neutralizing Grandmasters, which would make teaching him a lesson even more difficult. However, this wasn't a problem for Wang Xianming. After all, he was only half a step away from becoming a mental strength master. The control he could exert over his body was far beyond what an ordinary Honglian Grandmaster like Xueqi could exert. In a situation where Wang Xianming fully exerted himself, he would need only 3 seconds to kill a Honglian Grandmaster, let alone a neutralizing Grandmaster. Besides, his goal was only to injure Xueqi heavily. Xueqi did not doubt the man in the slightest. After all, not only was Wang Xianming incredibly famous in Haitian City's upper zone, but Xueqi had sparred with him before and suffered defeat after exchanging a single punch. Moreover, after that exchange, his entire arm had gone numb and became paralyzed for a short period, despite Wang Xianming holding back. Before that fight, Xueqi had never thought that it would be possible for a person to possess such incredible strength. Wang Xuanming's strength could practically rival Superman's. With such strength, it would be child's play for Wang Xianming to teach Xueqi a lesson. While Wang Xianming might look like a 25-year-old man, he was, in reality, nearing 35 already. Yet, even at his age, he had just barely touched upon the threshold of this technique. In contrast, not only had this young woman before him learned this technique, but she had also mastered it to the point where she could dodge the attack of a half-step mental strength master with ease. Upon thinking up to this point, Wang Xianming rushed to the door almost immediately. He had no intention of staying here for even a second longer. If he were to clash against such a monster, it would be impossible for him to produce any results within the limited time available. If he stayed any longer, the enforcement robots would catch him. However, when Wang Xianming reached the entrance, he found another lithe figure standing by the door. This person was none other than Aqua Rose. Scram! Looking at the woman dressed in a light blue nightgown before him, Wang Xianming grew enraged. Not only had he failed to accomplish his mission, but there was even a monster behind him. If he wasted any more time here, he would definitely fall into the enforcement robot's hands. Hence, Wang Xuanming's first reaction when seeing Aqua Rose was to attack her with everything he had. The next moment, over a dozen fists could be seen punching at Aqua Rose, every punch carrying the full strength of a Honglian Grandmaster. Even a Honglian Grandmaster would suffer internal injuries and lose consciousness if they got hit by such a barrage of punches. However, Wang Xianming was dumbfounded once he finished executing his attack. When his fists had landed on the woman before him, he felt as if he were shadowboxing. Not only did his attacks fail to repel the woman, but the woman had even moved closer to him. By the time Wang Xianming had executed well over 100 punches, Aqua Rose stood only half a step away from his 2-meter-tall body, her delicate palm smacking his chest. Despite Aqua Rose only executing a gentle strike, Wang Xianming felt an intense pain in his chest. The pain was so unbearable that he stumbled 2 steps back. How is this possible? Wang Xianming gaped at the woman before him in disbelief. A monster. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You another monster. At this time, Gentle Snow arrived behind Wang Xianming and was quietly looking at the burly man. Wang Xianming revealed an incomparably ashen expression as he switched his gaze between Aqua Rose and Gentle Snow, wishing he could kill Yi Kuei. How did that man conduct his investigation? 2 inhuman monsters actually lived inside an ordinary residential unit. Even the security level at the mansion areas couldn't compare to the security of this little house. Chapter 2848. Uproar at the entrance of the 6th Southern District. 10 minutes have gone by already. Looking at his quantum watch, Yi Kuei smiled in delight. Mr. Wang should be taking action right about now. Yi Kuei did not doubt Wang Xuanming's strength in the slightest. If not for the enforcement robots being too powerful, Yi Kuei would have wanted to spectate the fight at a close distance and see how terrified and helpless Shifeng was against Wang Xianming. After all, a neutralizing grandmaster like Shifeng would be utterly incapable of resisting Wang Xuanming's strength. The most he could do was run away. Once Shifeng was taken care of, dealing with Ji Luorong would become a lot easier. Just as Yi Kuei was entertaining such thoughts, a loud noise suddenly came from the residential area. Has he started taking action? Yi Kuei grew excited when he heard the noise, and he couldn't help taking a few steps toward the residential area. Although he knew that the most he would see from his location was Shifeng's building, this was more than enough. He was only curious to find out how many seconds Shifeng would last against a monster like Wang Xianming. 3 seconds? Or perhaps 4 seconds. Based on the strength Shifeng had displayed previously, Yi Kuei admitted that the younger man was indeed stronger than himself. However, if it came down to an all-out fight, he would have a great chance of victory. After all, Honglian Grandmasters did not possess just incredible defensive capabilities but also recovery abilities far superior to the average person's. Yi Kuei might have suffered significant damage from Shifeng's palm strike, but he had also recovered from the injury very quickly. One could say that the only advantages Shifeng had over the average Honglian Grandmaster were speed and destructive power. However, in front of Wang Xianming, these advantages would be negligible. Hence, Shifeng would probably last against Wang Xianming roughly as long as an average Honglian Grandmaster would. After leaving his hiding spot, Yi Kuei immediately noticed Wang Xianming charging into Shifeng's house. Wang Xuanming's speed was so fast that Yi Kuei didn't even catch a clear sight of him. However, 2 seconds after Wang Xianming disappeared into the house, he actually reappeared at the entrance. He's done already. Yi Kuei was dumbfounded when he saw Wang Xianming back at the entrance of Shifeng's house. He never thought that Wang Xianming would be so powerful as to end the fight in just 1 second. With such strength, calling Wang Xianming a monster wouldn't be an exaggeration at all. Wang Xianming was on a whole different level from Honglian Grandmasters like himself. However, in the next moment, Yi Kuei was stunned once more. A woman wearing a light blue nightgown had actually appeared before the entrance without him realizing it. Meanwhile, as if agitated by this woman's appearance, Wang Xianming promptly launched a flurry of punches at her. Even from several hundred meters away, Yi Kuei could clearly sense the terrifying aura Wang Xianming exuded. Madness, violence, destruction. Nobody could possibly survive Wang Xuanming's chaotic punches. Has he lost his mind? Yi Kuei was horrified. If Wang Xianming had simply taught Shifeng a lesson and landed the latter in the hospital for several months, the Green God Company wouldn't look too deeply into the matter. At most, it would strengthen the residential area security and give Shifeng some compensation. However, if Wang Xianming took a life in the upper zone, he would touch the Green God Company's bottom line. At that time, the company would definitely conduct a thorough investigation into the matter until it found the culprit. Once Wang Xianming was caught, even the big shots living in the middle layer wouldn't be able to help him. In fact, he might even drag down Lu Tiandi and Yi Kuei as accomplices. However, before Yi Kuei could recover from his shock, he received yet another jolt. This time, his eyes nearly fell out of their sockets. This was because the woman dressed in a nightgown actually remained unscathed despite facing Wang Xuanming's flurry of punches. She even moved closer and closer to Wang Xianming and eventually planted a palm on his chest. The instant the woman's blow landed, Wang Xianming actually stumbled 2 steps back and clutched his chest in pain. He also stared at the woman before him with fear in his eyes. Who is she? Why did such a monster appear in Shifeng's house? Yikuei was shocked and confused as he looked at Aqua Rose, who stood in the corridor outside Shifeng's house. He even rubbed his eyes to make sure he wasn't hallucinating. Wang Xianming, an incredibly powerful Honglian grandmaster, had actually lost to a frail woman. As Yikuei gaped in shock, Wang Xianming added to Yikuei's confusion by charging forward and attacking Aqua Rose once more. He actually showed no signs of trying to escape from another location. However, Yikuei quickly noticed that another woman of extraordinary beauty had walked out of the house. This woman was similarly dressed in a snow-white nightgown and had silky black hair flowing down to her waist. Under the illumination of moonlight, she looked just like a goddess that had descended to the mortal world. Although this woman did not exude an imposing aura, the indifference in her eyes combined with Wang Xianming's strange behavior allowed Yikuei to guess what was going on. Most likely, the woman behind Wang Xianming was a monster as well. Hence, he did not choose to enter the house and break out from another location. After all, if Wang Xianming were to fight inside the more spacious house, he would have to face those 2 monstrous women simultaneously. No matter how powerful Wang Xianming was, he definitely wouldn't have any opportunity to escape under such circumstances. Hence, he could only choose to fight in the narrow hallway and risk a pincer attack. However, contrary to Wang Xianming's expectations, Gentle Snow had no intention of double-teaming him. She simply stood aside and quietly looked at the broken door, appearing quite bothered about it. In other words, the broken door seemed much more important to Gentle Snow than Wang Xianming was. On the other side, Aqua Rose treated Wang Xianming's series of desperate attacks as if they were child's play. Not only did she evade all of them effortlessly, but she also landed another palm strike on Wang Xianming, aggravating his injuries. Their clash continued for 4 seconds. At this point, Wang Xianming could no longer stand steadily, so weakened that even a Honglian grandmaster could go up against him. Trying to escape in such a condition was a luxury he couldn't afford. Before Wang Xianming could launch another round of attacks against Aqua Rose, the alerted enforcement robots finally arrived at the scene. After distinguishing everyone's identities, the enforcement robots promptly took Wang Xianming into custody. Once arrested by the enforcement robots, even a Honglian grandmaster would have no chance of putting up a struggle. As Yikuei watched Wang Xianming's capture, he noticed Gentle Snow walking out of the house and looking in his direction. Fear seized Yikuei's mind, and goosebumps rose all over his body. He instinctively turned around and fled immediately. She shouldn't have seen me. I was so far away, and I even had my aura concealed. Even if she's a monster, she shouldn't have discovered me. Yikuei reassured himself this way as he fled. He repeatedly told himself that he was merely imagining things. Only after Yikuei had left Yuantian City's upper zone did he finally calm down from receiving Gentle Snow's attention. That was too damned scary. How can such a monster exist in this world? Chills crawled down Yikuei's back when he recalled Gentle Snow's indifferent gaze. I need to have the young master report this matter to the higher-ups immediately. Those monsters aren't things we can offend. Those 2 women simply aren't human. As Yikuei was fleeing Yuantian City's upper zone, Xia Qingying, the base layer's general manager, arrived at Shifeng's residential area together with several supervisors. Who's the fool who would actually dare assault someone in a residential area? Luo Hanbin frowned as he looked at the broken door before him. It had already been several years since a home assault had happened in Yuantian City's upper zone. The previous occasion had greatly angered the Green God Company. Although the victim had sustained only heavy injuries, not only had the offender gotten banished from the upper zone forever, but he was even imprisoned for 10 years once outside. Now that another occurrence had taken place, even if the Green God Company's executives didn't say anything, the managers of Yuantian City's upper zone definitely wouldn't spare the offender. However, when Luo Hanbin entered the house and saw Wang Xianming being held in place by 2 enforcement robots, his eyes nearly fell out of their sockets. Wang Xianming, a peerless genius of Haitian City's upper zone. Wang Xianming was a big shot who was only half a step away from becoming a mental strength master. Even a supervisor like Luo Hanbin had to act politely around him. Meanwhile, with Wang Xianming's strength, he could rank within the top 3 of Haitian City's upper zone's base layer. The man even had a mental strength master as his teacher. With all these conditions, he was almost certain to become a permanent resident of the middle layer. Let alone Luo Hanbin. Even Xia Qingying was shocked. Originally, she had expected the offender to be an ignorant punk. She never imagined that the offender would be a peerless genius of Haitian City's upper zone. She also couldn't help wondering how Shifeng had apprehended Wang Xianming. With Wang Xuanming's skills, Xia Qingying had only a slight edge over him. She couldn't guarantee she would win if they clashed. And if Wang Xianming focused solely on escaping, even she wouldn't be able to hold him down for 7 or 8 seconds. Looking at Shifeng sitting on the living room sofa, Xia Qingying blurted out, "You sure know how to surprise people. The last time, you broke the mental paths record. Now, you even brought down Haitian City's Wang Xianming." Smiling bitterly, Shifeng said, "An accident. This really is an accident. I never thought that a big shot from Haitian City's upper zone would actually take action against me out of the blue." From the time Wang Xianming had broken into the house and until his apprehension, Shifeng hadn't done anything. He had been a spectator all the while. He also never expected an expert like Wang Xianming to attack him. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Not wishing to reveal Gentle Snow and Aqua Rose's matters for the time being, he did not dispel Xia Qingying's misunderstanding. "All right then." Seeing that Shifeng didn't intend to continue speaking, Xia Qingying said, "Now that Wang Xianming has been arrested, the Green God Company will definitely punish him. Even his teacher won't be able to do anything about it. However, his teacher is incredibly protective of his students. While he might not be able to do anything about Wang Xuanming's punishment, he is sure to pick a fight with you. Although we will strengthen the security of this area, you should still be careful. It's best if you don't leave the residential area for the time being." Even base layer general managers like herself would have a headache dealing with the anger of a mental strength master, let alone Shifeng, who held only grade 1 authority. Chapter 2849. Hong Xinyuan's choice in one of Yuantian City's upper zone's mansion districts. "Uncle Hong, did something happen? Why did you suddenly call for me?" Muxin asked in confusion as she looked at Hong Xinyuan, who was standing by a French window and looking at the night view outside. She was just about to explore an ancient ruin. She had gathered her subordinates already. If she were lucky, she might discover a Tier 4 legacy land or a legacy guidance there. These things were incredibly important for the current Frost Heaven. The War of Worlds would be starting soon. Although her investigation had turned up very little information about the war, she had managed to deduce that they would face players of another world. At that time, the only options left for them would be to conquer or be conquered. It would be different from when players of other worlds entered the main continent. There would be no third option available to them. Hence, Frost Heaven needed to make as many preparations as possible before the War of Worlds began. Naturally, increasing the number of Tier 4 players the guild had was a top priority. Karue, who stood beside Muxin, was also confused by Hong Xinyuan's summons. She had just fallen asleep, yet before she could get any rest, she was rudely roused out of bed. Hence, she was still incredibly sleepy and wanted nothing more than to crawl back into her bed right now. "Take a look for yourselves," Hong Xinyuan said as he passed a document to Muxin and Karue. The document was none other than a summary of Wang Xinyuan's home assault in the 6th Southern District. How is this possible? Muxin couldn't help doubting her eyes when she read the report. She had heard of Haitian City's upper zone's Wang Xianming. An expert of his caliber could definitely rank as the number 1 or number 2 expert in the base layer of Yuantian City's upper zone. If such an expert decided to take covert action, even the Boulder Corporation would be powerless. All the corporation could do was have its members take shelter in its mansion temporarily. Nevertheless, Wang Xianming had not only failed in his attack on Shifeng, but even gotten apprehended. How could anyone possibly believe this? He was actually that powerful? After reading the report, Karue was now wide awake. Simultaneously, a hint of confusion had appeared in her eyes. Everything is as the report states. Looking at Muxin's surprised expression, Hong Xinyuan said, "I have to admit that I indeed underestimated Shifeng. It seems that he has kept a lot more secrets than we thought." After pondering on the matter for a moment, Muxin asked, "Uncle Hong, do you mean for us to deepen our relationship with Zero Wing?" "That's right. You already know what's coming in the future. When the war begins, even superpowers will have difficulty surviving. After hearing Yi Kuei's report, Lu Tiandi smiled and said, "We don't need to do anything. Although the outcome is different from what I imagined, things are still progressing according to plan. Now, all we need to do is sit back and wait." Wang Xianming had always been their teacher's favorite pupil, receiving the best resources available. Hence, Lu Tiandi had always gotten short-changed in terms of resources. If not for Lu Xinglua suffering a major failure, his teacher wouldn't have started placing importance on Lu Tiandi at all. Lu Tiandi's original plan had Wang Xianming and Shi Feng forming a grudge against each other. In his opinion, with Shi Feng's abilities and potential, Wang Xianming probably couldn't do anything significant to Shi Feng. Once Wang Xianming failed in his attack, Shi Feng would definitely retaliate and create a lot of problems for Wang Xianming. Naturally, Wang Xianming wouldn't sit still and would retaliate against Shi Feng as well. Shi Feng had exceeded Lu Tiandi's expectations and defeated Wang Xianming. However, this was not bad news for Lu Tiandi. In fact, this was the outcome he hoped to see the most. After all, not only would Wang Xianming get banished from the upper zone now, but Shi Feng would also earn the ire of their teacher. Once their teacher retaliated, Shi Feng would most likely be forced to leave the upper zone. In fact, he might even disappear from the world altogether. At that time, Lu Tiandi could plan on taking over Zero Wing. According to plan? Yi Kuei shuddered involuntarily when he saw Lu Tiandi's indifferent smile. He never thought that Lu Tiandi would scheme against even Wang Xianming. Ignoring his butler's reaction, Lu Tiandi said, "All right, move along. I still need you to take care of Ji Luorong's group in God's domain." "Yes, sir." Yi Kuei responded in a hurry. Although he had long since known that those who stood in Lu Tiandi's way would never have a good ending, he still got frightened when he saw one of Lu Tiandi's schemes coming to fruition. Meanwhile, after Wang Xuanming's assault, Yuantian City's upper zone arranged for Shi Feng's group to live in a better residential unit. Xia Qingying had an enforcement robot stationed near Shi Feng's new house long-term to prevent a similar situation from occurring. As icing on the cake, the Green God Company gifted 10 phantom potions and 10 life potions to Shi Feng as compensation. However, Shi Feng did not feel happy at all in this situation. On the contrary, he even felt slightly pressured. Now that Wang Xianming is in custody, his teacher definitely won't spare me. Even with an enforcement robot guarding the house 24/7, it'll probably be difficult to stop the retaliation of a mental strength master. As Shi Feng studied the information Xia Qingying supplied him, his head ached. Fu Jiuzhong, Wang Xuanming's teacher, was no ordinary individual. He was an expert that ranked at the top even in the middle layer and wielded incredible authority. He even had influence over several corporations operating in Yuantian City that rivaled the Boulder Corporation in scale. If Fu Jiuzhong began targeting Shi Feng would most likely have difficulty acquiring resources from Yuantian City's base layer. Although it is still a little early, it seems I have no choice but to take on the Divine Dragon's trial. Even now, Shi Feng still wasn't confident of completing Auerbach's trial. This was because a Tier 4 Divine Dragon was much stronger than an ordinary Tier 4 dragon. Even Tier 5 existences were unlikely to be a match for a Tier 4 Divine Dragon. Originally, Shi Feng had planned to challenge the trial only after further improving his mana body. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, however, it seemed that he had no choice but to push his plans forward. It was of utmost importance that he completed the Divine Dragon's trial now. This was because only by completing Auerbach's trial would he become the Divine Dragon's true companion. If that happened, Zero Wing could thoroughly solidify its position on the Western continent, and the Starlight Fortress could serve a much greater purpose. At that time, Zero Wing would be able to not only recruit talents from the Western continent in large numbers but also acquire large amounts of 7 Luminaries crystals. After all, a Heaven Mode regional dungeon produced an astonishing amount of 7 Luminaries crystals. With the 7 Luminaries crystals he acquired, he would then be able to exchange for a bunch of phantom potions and life potions. Only by securing phantom potions and life potions in bulk could he achieve a breakthrough in his mental strength in the real world and his concentration in God's domain. After returning to his room, Shi Feng promptly consumed a phantom potion and a life potion. He then lay in his fearless cabin and logged into the game. However, now that more and more Tier 4 players had begun appearing, the chances of players stumbling over the 7 treasures were much greater. Not to mention, the present Zero Wing was already far stronger than before. After its recent rapid development, Zero Wing now had more than 50,000 Tier 3 players under its command, a number that rivaled what the various superpowers had. In addition, the number of partners Zero Wing had continued to increase. Recently, Frost Heaven had thoroughly solidified its alliance with Zero Wing, drastically increasing Zero Wing's influence on the eastern continent. At this point, Zero Wing could expand its territory already. Hence, his hunt for the 7 treasures was no longer an impossible task. Moreover, he had to get his hands on the 7 treasures to elevate Zero Wing's strength further. This was because only by gathering all of the 7 treasures could he fully utilize their power. In fact, the 7 treasures could even suppress the Endless Abyss. If Zero Wing could acquire this power, thoroughly making an enemy out of the 5 great super guilds wouldn't be a problem. It also wouldn't have to fear the invasion of other gods' domains. After Xueqi finished assigning tasks, he promptly teleported to the Starlight Fortress to take on the Divine Dragon's trial so that he could solidify Zero Wing's position on the western continent. At that time, even if the World Seal broke and the War of Worlds began, Zero Wing would have the ability to defend itself against the attacks of the foreign gods' domain's powers. Western Continent, Starlight Fortress. The summoning array at the top of the summoning tower lit up, and Xueqi appeared in the summoning hall a moment later. Standing atop the summoning tower, Xueqi had a full view of the Starlight Fortress's situation. At present, the Starlight Fortress was no longer the same as before. Not only had the number of players visiting the fortress increased massively, but even the weakest among them was at Tier 3. There were even quite a number of Tier 4 experts roaming the streets. After briefly scanning the fortress, Xueqi discovered at least 10 Tier 4 players, nearly outnumbering what Zero Wing City had. If not for the Divine Dragon's presence, even if the Starlight Fortress had Divine Tribe and Netherworld Empire's assistance, it would still be very difficult to keep all these players in check, not to mention the large number of visiting NPCs and NPC forces greedily eyeing the fortress. Yet, due to the Silver Divine Dragon, these players and NPCs had no choice but to lie low. After checking the fortress's situation, Xueqi went to the Summoning Tower's summoning altar, which was also the Silver Divine Dragon's resting place. When Xueqi arrived in the spacious summoning altar, what greeted him was the sight of a miniature version of the Silver Divine Dragon Auerbeck. He then transformed into a streak of light and disappeared from the summoning altar, leaving Auerbeck by itself in the spacious room once more. After briefly getting dazzled by runes, Xueqi gradually recovered his sight and found that he stood before a majestic temple. The temple was tens of thousands of meters tall, and it looked like a huge mountain. Even a dragon would appear tiny in front of this temple, let alone a human. As soon as Xueqi walked up to the 1,000-meter-tall door before him, an ancient and deep voice suddenly rang out in his mind. A human? No, you're not a human. How interesting. Auerbeck actually sent you here to take the trial? Along with this voice, the phantom of a gigantic dragon gradually faded into view before Xueqi. This dragon was well over 1,000 meters tall, and when it appeared, Xueqi immediately felt stifled. For a moment, he wondered if he was standing before a Tier 6 god. It seems that little fellow has a really favorable opinion of you to actually let you take the trial, the dragon said as it looked at Xueqi. Smiling, it continued, very well. I will abide by the old contract since Auerbeck has sent you here. You should prepare yourself. You might not be able to pass this trial, but if you do your best, you will still receive great benefits, so make sure to cherish this opportunity. After the dragon finished speaking, Xueqi found that the view in front of him had changed completely. Now, what was before him wasn't a massive temple but a broken bridge covered in gray mist. Meanwhile, he was currently standing on this broken bridge, and he could vaguely make out land in the distance. The instant the gray mist enveloped him, Xueqi was stupefied. Eternal energy. No. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU to be precise, its eternal energy condensed into a mist form. The moment the gray mist enveloped Xueqi, his mind felt refreshed like never before. Numerous ideas constantly emerged from the depths of his brain, and he could also view the operating principles of the mana surrounding him with unprecedented clarity. Before Xueqi could recover from his shock, the dragon's deep voice echoed in his mind once more. Repair the broken bridge using mana. So long as you repair 1/3 of the bridge, you will pass the trial. Your time limit is 3 days. However, for every 300 meters you progress, the time limit will get extended by an additional day. If you fail to repair 1/3 of the bridge when your time runs out, you will have failed the trial. When the dragon finished speaking, Xueqi heard rocks breaking off somewhere nearby. Turning toward the sound source, he found that the bridge's broken end was continuously crumbling. At this rate of collapse, let alone 3 days, the remaining portion of the broken bridge would disappear completely in just a few hours. And once the bridge disappeared, he would plunge into the endless darkness below. Chapter 2851. Mana Reconstruction. What an amazing bridge! When Xueqi spread his senses across the broken bridge, he was astounded. This was because this bridge was actually made entirely of mana that had solidified. Although this mana was solid, it was akin to sand. He could walk on this bridge without it collapsing like a sandcastle only because of special mana constructs holding the grains of sand together. After thinking up to this point, Xueqi promptly extended his mana domain to take control of these mana constructs and prevent the bridge from collapsing any further. However, the instant he did so, he was stunned. Manipulating solidified mana, is this taxing? Xueqi had plenty of experience manipulating mana that had condensed into a mist or liquid. In fact, he could control liquid mana as if it were his own arms. Yet, when he tried manipulating only a small bit of solid mana, he felt as if he was trying to move arms that had been injected with lead. Not only was the process incredibly strenuous, but even the slightest distraction meant immediately losing control of the mana. Meanwhile, the difficulty of maintaining the entire bridge's integrity was akin to holding up a weight of tens of tons. Not to mention, he also had to have this solid mana move according to his will to reconstruct the collapsed portion of the bridge. Looking at the continuously collapsing bridge, Xueqi finally understood just how difficult this trial was. Let alone reconstructing the bridge, just keeping the bridge from collapsing any further was already a monumental task. As Xueqi racked his brain over how to prevent the bridge from collapsing, the phantom of a gigantic dragon was quietly observing him in a distant cloud of mist. His grasp on mana is too immature. Let alone 3 days, he won't last even 3 hours at this rate. After taking a look at Xueqi's understanding and control over mana, the dragon shook its head and wings, disappearing silently from the mist. Time passed quickly. Now, less than half of the broken bridge, which was originally over 20 meters long, remained. Moreover, the bridge's rate of collapse was even accelerating as it grew shorter. This won't do. At this rate, the entire bridge will be gone in less than half an hour. I need to think of a way to stabilize a small portion of the bridge first. Xueqi had a headache as he looked at the collapsing bridge. He gave up on manipulating the entire bridge and chose to secure only a 2-meter length of the bridge. This was also the maximum amount of solid mana he could currently manipulate. Any more and the solid mana would challenge his control. Everything progressed just as Xueqi expected. In less than 20 minutes, the portion of the bridge he had given up on collapsed completely, and only the 2-meter stretch under his feet remained relatively stable. Even so, this small portion was still disintegrating gradually. How strange. After all, the disparate elements of mana in his body were all intermixed. Just separating them would already drive countless expert players to despair. To put this task into perspective, one could imagine a player's mana body as a box filled with millions of marbles of different colors, and these marbles represented mana of different elements. If players wanted to use a specific type of mana within their bodies, they would have to sort through all of these marbles and take out the ones they wanted to use. Doing so would be incredibly difficult and time-consuming. Not to mention, a mana body was much more complex than a box of marbles, which would further add to the difficulty. Fortunately for Xueqi, he had acquired a Saint's Legacy. Although the Ice World Saint's Legacy focused more on the ice element, the legacy had provided an introduction to the other elements. Thank goodness that Saint Legacy mentioned the various elements of mana. Otherwise, I likely wouldn't have any hope of completing the trial this time. Xueqi couldn't help smiling bitterly as he sensed the jumbled mana flowing within his body. Previously, when he made use of mana, he did not bother segregating it at all. He simply used it as it was and didn't find any problem with it. Now, however, He realized that his past actions had thoroughly mixed up the various types of mana in his body, and made them even more difficult to separate. Separating the various types of mana in his body without knowing their basic properties would be akin to sorting a box of colorful marbles while colorblind. That would be mission impossible. Immediately, Xueqi began classifying his mana based on the Ice World Saint's introduction on the various elements. Fire-type mana was violent, scorching hot, and extremely difficult to control. Ice-type mana was quiet, cold, and hardly moved. Wind-type mana was free, refreshing, and spirited. Different elements of mana had their own habits and operating principles. If it were in the past, Xueqi would have found it impossible to distinguish them in detail. However, Xueqi was currently a half-step Grandmaster Magician. While distinguishing between the various types of mana remained difficult, it wasn't impossible. One trick he thought of to facilitate this process was constructing a single attributed elemental magic array for each of the various elements. This magic array would act as a filter and capture only the specific element of mana it was made to capture. The other elements would pass through the magic array unimpeded. This way, whenever he wished to call upon a particular element, he could immediately use the corresponding elemental magic array to gather the mana he needed. Originally, constructing these elemental magic arrays within one's mana body was a very delicate task. Even a half-step Grandmaster Magician like Xueqi would need 1 or 2 days to construct all of the necessary elemental magic arrays. However, thanks to the eternal energy surrounding him, Xueqi spent only 15 minutes constructing all the necessary magic arrays. Immediately, the various elements of mana in Xueqi's mana body gathered at specific locations, no longer one big heterogeneous mess. Amazing! So, this is the effect of segregating mana? When Xueqi scanned the mana in his body, he found that not only had its purity undergone a qualitative transformation, but his mana body also resonated far more powerfully with the environment. In fact, he also had a much easier time manipulating the magic array responsible for controlling his mana body. Now, he could even operate his mana body with a threefold manipulation method. So, this is why I couldn't cross the 110% threshold despite my concentration having reached the Tier 4 peak standard. Looking at the system notification that had appeared before him, Xueqi grew ecstatic. Just a moment ago, his mana body's completion rate had hit the legendary threshold. Read latest chapters at Xueqi World. His mana body had reached a 120% completion rate. Meanwhile, the instant his mana body reached the 120% threshold, Xueqi sensed his physique improving significantly and his perception of his surroundings rising to a whole other level. Most importantly, his mana was not only much denser than before, but its quantity had also doubled. Now that I'm done segregating my mana, it's about time I started taking on the trial. Xueqi shifted his gaze toward the half-meter-long bridge underfoot. Chapter 2852. Breakthrough. Tier 5 concentration. Even without Xueqi deliberately maintaining the bridge, the aura he radiated was now enough to slow the bridge's collapse drastically. A 120% completion rate mana body truly is amazing. No wonder people thought players could contend against a dragon of the same tier once a player's mana body reached 120% completion. Xueqi was astonished as he studied the stabilized bridge underfoot. Despite not making a conscious effort to control his mana body, he exerted a powerful stabilizing effect on his surroundings. With how powerful his current mana body was, he couldn't even begin to imagine how powerful his mana domain had become. Fighting a dragon of the same tier and level aside, he could now contend against a half-step demon king of the same level, at the very least. Afterward, Xueqi began injecting his segregated mana into the broken bridge. Once he did so, the broken bridge seemed renewed. The bridge's gradual collapse instantly halted, and its toughness had clearly risen to a whole new level as well. At this time, the bridge could probably receive Tier 4 attacks without sustaining any damage. Amazing! Sure enough, this is the true way to use mana. In the past, whenever he activated a skill or spell, he would make use of every type of mana available in his body to manipulate the ambient mana around him. Achieving a 10% efficiency by doing so would already be fortunate. This was because most skills and spells utilized only a specific element of mana to activate. To manipulate only a specific type of mana in the environment, using the corresponding element of mana to do so would yield the best results. Using other elements would still allow one to exert a certain degree of control, However, the efficiency would be incredibly poor. A backlash might even occur. Now that Xueqi had perfectly matched his mana with the ambient mana, he could use the ambient mana's power at 100% efficiency. One could easily imagine how much of a boost to his combat power this change would bring. After thoroughly stabilizing the broken bridge, Xueqi shifted his attention to the mana constructs keeping the bridge together. Keeping the bridge's mana constructs stable and operational could be considered the bottom line for this trial. If he wished to pass the trial, he would need to reconstruct the bridge. Otherwise, all he could do was stand still and stare idly at the distant land until his time ran out. After carefully inspecting the bridge, Xueqi was surprised. Previously, he had focused entirely on stabilizing the bridge, so he hadn't spent much time observing the bridge itself. Now that his mana body had reached a 120% completion rate, his perception of his surroundings had improved to a point where it felt as if he had again taken over a half-step Demon King's body. As expected of the Dragon Race's trial. This bridge's mana constructs are simply phenomenal. Xueqi sighed in awe as he observed the broken bridge's structure. This bridge has made use of practically every property and operating principle of the various elements of mana. Without a considerable understanding of these aspects, it would be impossible to create such mana constructs. In God's domain, it was already a heaven-defying task for players to gain a deep understanding of the operating principles of the various types of mana. Hence, making proper use of these types of mana was simply a luxury players couldn't afford. In fact, even the Ice World Saints Legacy provided a detailed introduction of only Ice-type mana and just briefly touched on the other elements. Needless to say, the Legacy didn't include instructions on how to use these other mana types. However, the bridge Xueqi stood on perfectly displayed the basic use of the various elements of mana. It was much better than a simple text introduction. Of course, it wouldn't be an easy task to see how exactly this bridge was constructed. This was because ordinary Tier 4 existences couldn't get a clear view of the operating principles of mana, let alone the operating principles of a mana construct. Only dragons with their high life ratings could possibly accomplish such a feat at Tier 4. Even so, this situation was definitely a massive opportunity for Tier 4 players. The biggest hurdle Tier 4 players needed to cross to reach Tier 5 was the construction of their personalized mana body. This process required players to have not only excellent control over mana but also a profound understanding of the operating principles and usage of mana and knowledge of the construction of mana bodies. Meanwhile, the broken bridge underneath Xueqi just so happened to address these problems. Suppressing the impatience in his heart, Xueqi immediately began reconstructing the broken bridge with his own mana. Following this, time passed quickly. Although reconstructing the bridge was incredibly challenging, due to the eternal energy surrounding him, Xueqi found that the incomparably complex mana constructs weren't impossible to understand. Despite encountering failure one after another, Xueqi did not grow disappointed but even became increasingly excited instead. This was because he was making progress with each failure. As he continuously adjusted his utilization of the various mana types, his control over them also improved in precision and efficiency. After experimenting for 2 days straight, Xueqi finally constructed a half-meter-long bridge. I did it! I finally did it! An indescribable sense of joy and excitement welled up in Xueqi's heart as he looked at the portion of the bridge he had reconstructed. Although the bridge he reconstructed looked much cruder than the original bridge, it did not send him plunging into the abyss below when he tried to stand on it. Most importantly, he had finally gained a basic understanding of the various mana constructs. This meant that he had finally reached a qualified level when it came to utilizing the various elements of mana. With these achievements, he was confident he could begin constructing his Tier 5 mana body. Of course, Xueqi did not let his achievements blind him. He still gave the trial's completion top priority. After all, having a divine dragon as a companion was much more important than constructing his personalized mana body. Immediately afterward, he resumed reconstructing the broken bridge and advanced toward the distant land. Although Xueqi had spent 2 days reconstructing his first half-meter-long segment, now that he had a foundation, he could reconstruct the subsequent segments much more quickly. Moreover, he also improved his precision with every segment he reconstructed, which in turn made his reconstructions look increasingly refined. After working for nearly a day, Xueqi finally reached the 500-meter mark, his achievement extending his time limit by 1 day. The distance from the starting point to the distant land is roughly 20 kilometers. So, I'll need to extend the bridge by 7 kilometers or so to pass the trial. If I can complete 500 meters per day, I should finish this trial within half a month. After Xueqi made some rough mental calculations, anticipation filled him. Although he would be spending much more time in this trial than he initially expected, the harvest he would gain was very much worth the time spent. After resting for a moment, Xueqi promptly resumed his job as a construction worker. Meanwhile, after another 8 days had gone by while Xueqi was reconstructing the broken bridge, a loud tearing sound suddenly appeared in a secret land in the eastern continent. A spatial channel several kilometers tall and 20 kilometers wide was sealed in this secret land. The moment the loud tearing noise sounded, the divine runes sealing this spatial channel shattered and faded out of existence. It is still starting in the end? An illusory figure appeared before the spatial channel. After looking at the spatial channel with a complicated gaze, this figure then disappeared without a trace. At the same time as this illusory figure disappeared, nearly 20 figures emerged from this gigantic spatial channel. Every one of these figures exuded powerful and ancient auras highly incompatible with the surrounding space. Ha ha ha! It's finally open. Our guild was even the first to discover it. So, this is an alternate god's domain? Why is the ambient mana here so thin? Although the mana density is somewhat low here, it is still another god's domain. Hurry up and notify the guild leader and the others. Tell them that the seal has been lifted and that the world passage is open. Have them make the necessary preparations. I'll go ahead with a team to understand the situation of this god's domain. We must claim this world for ourselves ahead of the other guilds, said the middle-aged man standing at the head of the team. At the middle-aged man's words, the team immediately split into 2 groups. 3 players returned to the world passage, while the remaining 15 players charged straight toward the secret land's exit. As these foreign invaders were taking action, Xueqi was struggling inside the distant special space. I didn't think that reconstructing the bridge would place such a huge burden on the brain. It's already been 8 days, yet I haven't even reached the 3,400-meter mark. I've also exhausted more than half of my concentration already. Xueqi smiled bitterly as he looked at the distant land. Read latest chapters at Xueqi World. EU at this time, he more or less understood why the giant dragon had such low hopes for him. Originally, he thought that he could progress 500 meters a day. However, the more time he spent in the trial, the greater the mental pressure he suffered from reconstructing the bridge. Whenever he tried manipulating the bridge's mana constructs, he felt like needles were pricking his mind. Moreover, the degree of pain intensified as he progressed, making the bridge's reconstruction increasingly difficult. Now, he couldn't even manage 300 meters in a day. Despite this situation, Xueqi had no intention of giving up. After all, every moment he spent in this special space allowed him to improve his control over the various elements of mana. If possible, he even wished he could spend several months in this special space. However, this obviously wasn't allowed, as proven by the increasingly powerful mental pressure he suffered. This feature was most likely implemented to deal with anyone trying to exploit this special space's benefits. Xueqi continued pushing forward for the next 3 days. By the end of the 3rd day, Xueqi would suffer intense pain even if he only slightly manipulated his mana. After the 4th day, Xueqi's complexion had not only become deathly pale, but even his consciousness was beginning to blur. Meanwhile, as his consciousness grew increasingly hazy, he gradually understood that his time in the trial was coming to an end. This wasn't just because he was running out of time but also because he would thoroughly exhaust his concentration and collapse after a few more attempts. The next moment, after Xueqi completed another 1-meter-long segment and was about to lose consciousness, the system's crisp and indifferent voice suddenly entered his ears. System. Congratulations. Your concentration has reached the Tier 5 standard. It is also detected that your mana body has reached the 120% completion rate. You have one opportunity to receive a world blessing and reconstruct your sea of consciousness. Do you wish to activate the world blessing now? Opportunity will be rejected by default if you do not respond in 3 minutes. Not daring to be careless, Xueqi took a deep breath, stopped work on the bridge, and focused only a portion of his consciousness on stabilizing it to prevent it from collapsing. He planned to give the reconstruction process his all. 30 seconds went by in the blink of an eye. Xueqi felt an unprecedented pain assault him as if his soul was getting ripped out of his body. Had he not absorbed the Tier 4 hellfire before, he wouldn't have been able to endure this pain at all. However, after 10 seconds of this soul-wrenching pain, it disappeared all of a sudden. Simultaneously, Xueqi felt his mind go completely blank. As for his soul, what remained of it were only countless soul fragments. Immediately afterward, numerous magic arrays appeared before him. These magic arrays were so complex that despite being a half-step Grandmaster Magician himself, he was still shocked. He spotted over a dozen Grandmaster magic arrays. As for Master magic arrays, they easily numbered over 100. Meanwhile, all of these magic arrays joined together to form an incomparably large soul array. System. You have 4 hours to reconstruct your sea of consciousness. Once 4 hours have passed, the world blessing will disappear. If you do not achieve at least a 40% completion rate by the end of these 4 hours, your sea of consciousness will not be reconstructed. Afterward, as a consequence of having your soul shattered, you will enter a weakened soul state for 20 natural days. 20 days? Xueqi wasn't particularly surprised by the penalty for failure. Opportunities and risks came hand in hand in God's domain. In fact, a 20-day penalty could even be considered very light. If a Tier 5 expert were to find out that this opportunity came with such low risks, they would do everything they could to secure it. Subsequently, Xueqi stopped thinking about other things and focused on copying the soul array into his sea of consciousness. He couldn't decide whether he was fortunate or unfortunate. The fortunate part of this situation was that he had accepted the world blessing while in this special space full of eternal energy. He would have a much easier time drawing the soul array in this environment. The unfortunate part was that, along with the destruction of his soul, he had lost the ability to stabilize the broken bridge. In other words, he didn't have 4 hours to complete the soul array at all. Despite his frustrations, Xueqi did not give up on this opportunity. Moreover, due to the eternal energy's effects, he managed to familiarize himself with the master magic arrays and replicate them with ease. The soul array's completion rate rose at a rate visible to the naked eye. 1%, 3%, 7%. In just 1 hour, Xueqi had already completed 16% of the gigantic soul array. At this rate, he could definitely reach the required 40% within 4 hours. Even if copying the Grandmaster magic arrays later would slow down his progress, reaching 40% shouldn't be difficult. Another 1.5 hours went by, during which the soul array's completion rate had reached 35%. Xueqi found his progress unbelievable. Hence, he attempted to copy his first Grandmaster magic array. The instant he completed the magic array, his progress rose from 35% to 38%. It increased by this much? Xueqi looked at his progress bar in surprise. Completing a master magic array didn't even increase his progress by 0.5%. Now, completing just one Grandmaster magic array had raised his progress by 3%. Meanwhile, under the eternal energy's effects, his speed in copying the Grandmaster magic array wasn't much slower than when he worked on the master magic arrays. Without my support, the bridge can last 3 hours at most. I only have about 20 minutes left now, so I can only attempt one more Grandmaster magic array. Although Xueqi guessed that the broken bridge would remain stable for 3 hours without his support, that was only an estimate. As a precaution, he decided to conclude his attempt after copying one more Grandmaster magic array. The soul array was massive. However, the crucial parts of the soul array were still the dozen or so Grandmaster magic arrays, particularly the 6 serving as the soul array's core. Originally, Xueqi had thought to complete more master magic arrays to allow the core magic arrays to exhibit greater functionality. Unfortunately, he clearly did not have time for that. Now, he could only grit his teeth and draw the second core magic array. Time passed quickly. 10 minutes later, Xueqi finished drawing the second core magic array. The soul array's completion rate jumped from 38% to 41%, reaching the system's requirement. Upon seeing this, Xueqi chose to complete the reconstruction. System. Magic array completion rate at 41%. You have met the basic requirement for reconstruction. Your sea of consciousness will be reconstructed according to the constructed magic array. Do you wish to begin the reconstruction? Reconstruct. Xueqi promptly chose to go through with the reconstruction. Although he had more than an hour remaining before the world blessing disappeared, if he died midway, his reconstruction attempt would become forfeit as well. The next moment, after he approved the reconstruction, the soul array drawn in his sea of consciousness began operating. Although the soul array was still incomplete, just like the system stated, it was functional. As his sea of consciousness's reconstruction began, Xueqi experienced an unprecedented mental clarity. His mind became much more active, and his reaction speed also improved significantly. After 20 seconds into the reconstruction, he discovered that his previously blurry sea of consciousness had become much more tangible. The change was akin to mist condensing into water. The change might not seem significant, but the density of his sea of consciousness had undergone a qualitative transformation. Although his sea of consciousness was still in an illusory state, Xueqi could tell that his thinking speed had more than tripled. So long as he focused his mind, he could observe the world around him in a decelerated state. Amazing! Xueqi was astonished as he inspected his newly reconstructed sea of consciousness. No wonder so many Tier 5 experts in the past had been so crazy about reconstructing their sea of consciousness. With my current sea of consciousness, even though my concentration is only at the Tier 5 basic standard, the rate of my soul's improvement is probably faster than someone with Tier 5 peak concentration. His concentration remained at the Tier 5 basic standard. However, his soul's strengthening rate was superior to even that of experts with Tier 5 peak concentration. The next moment, when Xueqi opened his eyes again, his surroundings looked completely different from before. The range of his mental perception had increased from 100 yards to 500 yards, and his 5 senses had also undergone a qualitative transformation. Similarly, his body felt more flexible and sharper than ever before. At this time, even though he wasn't actively manipulating his mana, the 2-meter-long bridge under him actually remained nearly stable. Moreover, his concentration was no longer depleted. Instead, it was brimming like never before. It seems I shouldn't have any problems completing the trial now. Xueqi smiled subconsciously as he looked at the relatively stable bridge. Previously, he had to make an effort to ensure that the bridge did not collapse. Doing so had taken up a lot of his focus. Now, he no longer needed to split his attention between the reconstruction and maintaining the bridge's integrity. He only needed to concentrate on reconstructing the broken bridge. This would reduce his mental stress by a large margin. Following this, Xueqi resumed reconstructing the bridge. He had a much easier time than before, which allowed him to progress at a flying pace. After just 3 more days, his progress finally reached the 1/3 mark of the entire bridge. However, Xueqi had no intention of stopping here. After all, the eternal energy in this place was simply wonderful. By staying here, he could not only further his understanding of the various mana types but also familiarize himself with his new sea of consciousness and verify the theories he thought up for his new mana body. Hence, he did not rush to exit the trial, continuing to advance and reconstruct the broken bridge. As Xueqi got closer to the distant land, he found that he also had to improve the quality of the supports he constructed. Otherwise, the bridge wouldn't be able to withstand the corrosion of the abyss below. Read latest chapters at Xueqi World. EU. After working for another 4 days and arriving at the halfway mark, he could no longer advance any further. However, his failure to progress wasn't because he had exhausted his concentration, but because the supports he constructed could no longer withstand the abyss's corrosion. Short of a qualitative transformation, they wouldn't be able to hold up the bridge at all. It seems this is as far as I can go. Xueqi couldn't help feeling a little disappointed as he looked at the distant land. At this time, it looked much clearer than before. From what he could sense, he should be able to receive massive benefits in that land. However, with his current standards, it was evidently impossible to construct a bridge of a much higher quality. Xueqi immediately chose to leave this special space. The second chest, named the Red Crystal Treasure Chest, contained 4 items, either Tier 5 skill books or Tier 5 legacy guidances suitable for the player. The third chest, named the Purple Jade Treasure Chest, rewarded players with 10 to 12 God crystals. The Blackstone Treasure Chest aside, both the Red Crystal Treasure Chest and Purple Jade Treasure Chest provided things Xueqi greatly desired. At this time, he only needed to create a personalized mana body to get promoted to Tier 5. Hence, Tier 5 skill books were of great importance to him. If he relied only on legacy skill points, he would be able to acquire only 2 Tier 5 skills at best. God crystals were equally important to him. This was because God crystals were needed to upgrade many of the weapons and equipment he possessed, and upgrading these items would provide a tremendous boost to his combat power. Pick 1. The dragon phantom smiled faintly when it saw the gleam in Xueqi's eyes. I will teleport you back in 3 minutes, so you'd best not take too long in choosing. After giving the matter some thought, Xueqi said earnestly, I've decided. I will go with the purple jade treasure chest. While the red crystal treasure chest was indeed important to him, he was, after all, still at Tier 4 right now. Moreover, the items appearing inside the red crystal treasure chest were completely random. If he were unfortunate, he might end up getting 4 Tier 5 legacy guidances. Moreover, God crystals weren't easy to come by. If he missed this opportunity, who knew how long he would have to wait before he received another opportunity to improve his weapons and equipment further. All right, this purple jade treasure chest is yours, the dragon phantom said, lifting a claw. Immediately, the barrier sealing the purple jade treasure chest disappeared. Xueqi chose to open the treasure chest without hesitation. After all, there was no way he could bring such a massive treasure chest away. The instant the treasure chest opened, divine might gushed out of it. Bathed in this divine might, even ordinary Tier 4 players would grow fearful and dare not approach the treasure chest. However, now that Xueqi's concentration had reached the Tier 5 standard, resisting this divine might wasn't much of a problem. In fact, he was confident he could stand tall in the presence of even a bona fide Tier 6 god in his present state. 11? Xueqi couldn't help feeling a little disappointed when he saw the number of god crystals in the treasure chest. If not for the luck attribute having no effect on high-caliber treasure chests, he definitely would have activated Divine Providence to boost his luck. After all, the value of 1 god crystal nearly rivaled that of fragmented legendary items. Moreover, god crystals were just as rare as fragmented legendary items. Although that's 1 less god crystal than I hoped for, I have more than enough to upgrade my weapon now. The next moment, Xueqi had the abyssal blade absorb 4 god crystals without hesitation. Now that he was at the half-step Tier 5 standard, only the Light of 2 Worlds was an adequate weapon for him. The abyssal blade couldn't keep up with him any longer. Hence, he had to upgrade it. After the abyssal blade absorbed the 4 god crystals, its skills got upgraded to Tier 4, and its basic attributes underwent some changes. Abyssal blade, one-handed sword, magic weapon, fragmented legendary rank, equipment requirement. Strength 3000, agility 2000 attack power, 235% of strength attribute, attack speed, 3% of agility attribute. All attributes, increases according to user's level, ignore levels plus 35 attacks have, 70% chance to cause 250% damage, 40% chance to cause 300% damage. Every attack increases attack speed by 2% to a maximum of 30%. When equipped, strength increased by 50%, agility increased by 50%, intelligence increased by 35%, endurance increased by 50%, attack speed increased by 40%. All effects of weapon-related skills increased by 20%. All item level requirements reduced by 10 levels. If wielder belongs to a swordsman-related class, all skill levels plus 6. Increase free ability points received for every increase in level by 2 points. Equipment Tier 4. Can be evolved, devour 9 god crystals to evolve to Tier 5. Additional active skill 1. Darkness Bind, Tier 4. Binds all enemies within a 500-yard radius for 4 seconds, and reduces their defense and magic resistance by 100% for 20 seconds. Cooldown, 40 seconds. Additional active skill 2. Darkness Domain, Tier 4. Converts an area of 800 yards around the user into a darkness domain. Weakens the senses of all enemies within the darkness domain, and reduces enemies' basic attributes by 20%. While inside the darkness domain, the user may control up to 36 strands of power of darkness. Each strand carries a force equivalent to 150% of the user's strength and causes 200% darkness damage. Duration, 60 seconds. Cooldown, 10 minutes. Additional passive Profound Inheritance. Mana Abyss, Tier 4. The higher the density of the mana surrounding the abyssal blade, the more power the weapon will exhibit. The power of the weapon can be increased up to 150%. Additional active Profound Inheritance. Black Dragon Soul, Tier 4. Grants the user the Black Dragon King's soul and transforms the user into the Black Dragon King. The higher the density of the surrounding mana, the higher the Black Dragon King's life rating will be. Can use the skill, Dragon Breath. Duration, 10 minutes cooldown. 15 hours a sword recast from the fragments of an ancient, unknown weapon. The Black Dragon King's power has been sealed within the sword, although the Black Dragon King has cursed the weapon. Beyond the immense strength the blade offers, the wielder must face a backlash after a certain amount of time. If the wielder cannot suppress the backlash, the wielder will receive the Black Dragon King's curse, permanently reducing all attributes by 70%. Unable to be dropped. Unable to be traded. Unable to be destroyed. After the Abyssal Blade absorbed the 4 God Crystals, its attributes and skills received significant improvements. Although the magic weapon was still no match for the Light of Two Worlds in terms of attack power and attack speed, it was still top tier among fragmented legendary weapons. Xueqi felt very satisfied after upgrading his weapon. Now that he had the Tier 4 Abyssal Blade, combined with his half-step Tier 5 standard, he was confident he could hold his own even against a real Tier 4 dragon. After all, once he transformed himself into a Tier 4 dragon, his combat standards and mastery over the elements would become much superior to the average Tier 4 dragons. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Although Xueqi also had the option of repairing the disintegration armor instead of upgrading the Abyssal Blade, he had decided against it. The disintegration armor was legendary set equipment. If he couldn't gather the complete set, the equipment requirement of an individual piece would be higher than normal. This would make it impossible for him to equip the disintegration armor. After all, legendary weapons and equipment were crafted for Tier 6 gods. Aside from a few unique legendary weapons and equipment, most would need players to reach Tier 5 at minimum to equip them. If he repaired the disintegration armor and ended up unable to equip it, he would definitely die of regret. Hence, he decided to upgrade the Abyssal Blade instead, to play safe. As for the disintegration armor, it wouldn't be too late to find more God Crystals to repair it once he had reached Tier 5. It's time to leave, the Dragon Phantom said, snapping Xueqi out of his reverie. It then raised a claw at Xueqi. Immediately, divine runes appeared around Xueqi one after another, enveloping him completely. His body then transformed into a streak of light and disappeared from the Dragon Temple. When the divine runes surrounding Xueqi disappeared, he found that he was back in the Summoning Tower's summoning altar. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.